Hey guys, just want to say thanks for tuning in today. Smash that subscribe button if you're new here, and as always, please like this video if you enjoy the stories. Now, let's get into the stories.
I almost didn't go that night, and that's the part that keeps looping in my head. If I had just stayed home and kept scrolling, none of this would have happened. But she had this way of texting that made it feel like we already knew each other. Not in a deep way, just in that casual late night kind of way where you start telling someone random stuff about your day and it feels easy. She said she liked quiet restaurants, not crowded places, somewhere you could actually hear yourself think. I thought that sounded mature, different from the usual loud bar meetups. We matched 3 days before. Her profile wasn't flashy. No filtered beach pics. No group photos where you had to guess which one she was. Just simple photos. Brown hair straight across her shoulders. Neutral expression. Almost too neutral. I remember thinking she looked like someone you'd sit next to in class and never notice until halfway through the semester. She suggested this small Italian place on the edge of town near the river. It wasn't sketchy or anything, just not somewhere I'd normally go. I looked it up, and it had decent reviews. Nothing weird. She said she'd get there early to grab a table. I showed up 5 minutes late because parking was annoying. The place looked normal from the outside. Warm lights in the windows, couples inside, nothing dramatic. I walked in expecting to scan the room and spot her. Instead, the host smiled at me like she was expecting me. That should have been the first red flag. I hadn't given my name at the door yet. She asked if I was there for the reservation. I said yeah, thinking maybe she gave them my name. Then the host reached under the podium and pulled out a plain white envelope. She held it out like it was a receipt I forgot. She told me the woman I was meeting had to leave suddenly, but she left this for me. That's when my stomach dropped. Not because she left, but because the host said my full name without asking. First and last. I never used my last name on dating apps. Ever. I took the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have. My full name was written across the front in neat black ink. Underneath it, smaller, were the words candidate number 4. I just stood there staring at it. The host went back to greeting people like this was totally normal. No relook, no sympathy. Like envelopes labeled candidate were just part of the dinner service. I stepped outside because I didn't want to open it in front of everyone. My hands were actually sweaty, which is embarrassing to admit. I kept telling myself it was probably some weird joke. Maybe she was into mystery stuff. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper and a small Polaroid photo. The photo was of me. Not from that night. From earlier that week, I was standing outside my apartment building, wearing the hoodie I only wear when I take out the trash. It was taken from across the street. My brain did this slow, delayed reaction thing where it didn't fully process it at first. I kept thinking it had to be edited, but the angle was real. The crack in the sidewalk near the mailbox was there. My car in the background. On the back of the photo, in the same handwriting, it said candidate number 4, punctual, routine-oriented, unaware. I felt this weird buzzing in my ears, like everything around me got distant. I unfolded the paper next. It wasn't a letter in a normal way. It was more like notes, bullet points about me. Leaves for work at 8:10 on weekdays. Returns around 5:40. Orders takeout on Tuesdays. Trash night is Thursday. No visible partner. Limited social visits. Each line hit harder than the last. It wasn't just basic info. It was patterns. Someone had been watching long enough to notice patterns. At the bottom it said evaluation incomplete. Further observation required. I looked up from the paper and scanned the street like I expected to see someone standing there with binoculars. It was just normal traffic. People walking their dogs. Nothing dramatic. I went back inside because I needed answers. I walked straight to the host and asked about the woman who left the envelope. I tried to keep my voice steady. The host told me she had brown hair and seemed calm. Paid for a drink in cash. Sat alone for about 20 minutes before leaving. She didn't act rushed. She just handed over the envelope and said to give it to me when I arrived. I asked if she mentioned anything else. The host shook her head. I went back to my car and just sat there. My brain kept trying to come up with logical explanations. Maybe it was a prank from someone I knew. But none of my friends would go that far. None of them knew my exact schedule either. I opened the dating app to check her profile. It was gone. Not unmatched. Deleted, like it never existed. Our chat history was gone too. I scrolled through my photos to see if I had saved any screenshots. I hadn't. Why would I? I drove home slowly, checking my mirrors more than usual. Every car behind me felt suspicious. I kept thinking about the word candidate. Candidate for what? When I got to my apartment building, I didn't park in my usual spot. I circled the block twice first. Everything looked normal. No one sitting in cars. No one standing around. I went inside and locked the door behind me. Then I did something I never do. I checked every room. Closet, bathroom, under the bed. I felt stupid doing it, but I could not do it. Nothing was out of place. I put the envelope on the kitchen table and just stared at it. Candidate number 4. That number bothered me more than anything. It meant there were at least 3 others. I barely slept that night. Every small sound felt amplified. Pipes in the walls, footsteps from the neighbor upstairs. I kept replaying the list in my head, routine-oriented, unaware. The next morning, I decided to test something. I left for work 10 minutes earlier than usual. I took a different route. Halfway there, I pulled into a random gas station and waited. I watched the entrance in the side mirror. After about 5 minutes, a gray sedan drove slowly past the station entrance. It didn't pull in. It just kept going. Maybe coincidence. Maybe not. I didn't see it again that day. For the next few days, I changed everything. Different grocery store. Different gym hours. I even skipped trash night once just to see if anything would happen. On Friday, I found another Polaroid tucked under my windshield wiper. This one was taken from behind me while I was in line at a coffee shop. I didn't even remember anyone standing close enough. On the back it said adaptive, cautious, still viable. My chest felt tight reading that word, viable. I called the restaurant and asked if they had security footage from that night. They said they'd have to check and call me back. They never did. I started noticing small things. A car parked down the street 2 nights in a row. A figure at the end of the block when I came home late. But every time I tried to get a clear look, they were gone. I deleted all my dating apps. I set my social media to private. I even considered moving, but that felt extreme. Maybe that was the point, to make me feel off balance. A week after the restaurant, I came home and found my trash can knocked over. Nothing stolen, just scattered across the sidewalk. Maybe it was an animal, but the lid was placed neatly beside it. That night, I found a 3rd envelope taped to my apartment door. Candidate number 4. Final phase pending. Inside was a printed map of my neighborhood with certain routes highlighted in yellow. My usual driving path, the shortcut behind the grocery store, the alley near my building. And in the corner, written small, was a date, the next day. I didn't wait around to see what final phase meant. I packed a bag, grabbed the envelopes and photos, and drove to my brother's place 2 towns over. I didn't tell him everything, just that I needed to crash for a few days. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a message from an unknown number. Nothing came. It's been 3 months now. I never went back to that apartment. I broke the lease and lost my deposit. Didn't care. Sometimes I still see gray sedans and my heart jumps. Sometimes I think about the other candidates, if they got envelopes too, if any of them ignored it. I still don't know what I was being evaluated for. I don't know who she really was. What bothers me most is how normal she seemed in those photos. How average. I kept the first Polaroid. I don't know why. Maybe to remind myself that someone can watch you for weeks and you never notice. I haven't gone on a date since. I knew something was off the second I saw how hard he was smiling at his phone. Not a normal smile either. It wasn't the polite half grin you do when someone sends you a meme. It was this tight, controlled smile, like he was watching something important unfold. And it kept happening. Every few minutes, buzz, glance down, smile. Buzz again, smile wider, like the phone mattered more than the actual human sitting across from him. That human was me. We met on a dating app that I had downloaded out of boredom. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just something different from the same guys I'd known since high school. His profile looked clean and normal. Good job, decent pictures, nothing cringy. He had this calm look about him. Not overly confident, not awkward, just steady. We matched on a Sunday night. By Monday afternoon, we had plans for Friday. He picked the place. A trendy roofed-up taco spot downtown. Kind of loud, kind of busy, lots of string lights and fake plants everywhere. The kind of place that charges $18 for 3 small tacos and acts like that's reasonable. I got there first. I always do. I hate walking in, scanning a room. He showed up right on time, which I appreciated. First impression, he looked exactly like his photos. That alone felt like a win. We ordered drinks. He suggested this spicy margarita thing. I said sure. The first 20 minutes were fine. Basic first date stuff. Where you grew up. What you do for work. Random funny stories. Nothing weird. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down and smiled. I didn't think much of it at first. People check their phones, whatever, but it kept happening. Buzz, smile, buzz, small laugh. He flipped the phone face down like he was being polite, but then it would buzz again and he'd turn it over fast. I started to feel like I was competing with something I couldn't see. I tried to ignore it. I kept talking about this awful coworker who microwaves fish in the office. He nodded along, but his eyes kept flicking down to the table. At one point, he actually tilted the screen slightly away from me while checking it. That was when my brain started connecting dots. Halfway through dinner, while he was in the middle of one of his phone smiles, I leaned forward like I was adjusting my napkin. I didn't mean to spy. It just kind of happened. That's when I saw it. It was a group chat or maybe some kind of private story. At the top, there was a poll. Bright blue background. My profile picture from the app was screenshot and posted there. The question said, should she make it to date 2? Underneath were 2 options, yes, no, and there were already votes. My stomach dropped so fast, it felt like I missed a step on stairs. I stared for maybe half a second too long, because he quickly angled the phone away. But I had already read the numbers. 63% yes, 37% no. I leaned back in my seat and tried to act normal. My brain was scrambling. Maybe I missaw it. Maybe it was something else. But then it buzzed again. He glanced down and his smile changed. It wasn't warm. It was entertained. I felt heat crawling up my neck. I started replaying everything I had said so far. Was I being judged, Liv? Were they scoring my answers? He asked me something about my hobbies. I answered automatically, but inside I was spiraling. A few minutes later, he excused himself to the restroom. The second he stood up, his phone lit up on the table. I shouldn't have looked. I know that, but I did. The poll was still there. The percentage had changed. 58% yes, 42% no. There were comments underneath. Someone had written, ask about her exes. Another said, see if she pays for anything. Another said, check if she gets jealous. My hands felt cold. I scrolled up just a little. Above the poll was a message from him earlier that night. First date going live now. Candidate seems promising. Let's see how she handles round 1. Round 1. It felt like I wasn't on a date. I was on some kind of game show and didn't know it. I put the phone back exactly how it was. When he came back, he smiled at me like nothing was wrong. I studied his face differently after that. Every time he asked a question, I wondered if it was fed to him through that chat. Every time he laughed, I wondered if it was genuine or if someone had told him to lighten the mood. I started giving vague answers on purpose. When he asked about past relationships, I kept it surface level. When he mentioned splitting the bill later as a joke, I said sure casually like I didn't care. Buzz. He looked down. This time, he didn't even try to hide the screen as much. Maybe he thought I hadn't noticed before. I saw the poll update again. 51% yes, 49% no. Someone had typed, she seems guarded. My chest tightened. They were analyzing me in real time. I felt exposed in a way that's hard to explain, like my personality was being dissected by strangers who weren't even in the room. He asked if I wanted dessert. I said no. The check came. It was $64 total. He hesitated for a split second before pulling out his card. His phone buzzed again before he even signed. He glanced down and his smile faded a little. I caught a clear look this time. 47% yes, 53% no. My photo was still there. Someone had added a new comment. Too aware. Might be trouble. I don't know what that meant, but it scared me more than the rest. We walked out together. The rooftop felt colder now. Louder. Everything felt fake. He walked me toward the elevator. His phone buzzed again. He checked it right in front of me this time. I saw it hit 45% yes. He sighed softly, not sad, just resigned. And that's when he finally told me what was going on, not in a dramatic way. More like he was explaining a hobby. He said his friends like to be involved. They help him avoid wasting time. They vote on compatibility. It's just for fun. For fun. I asked how many girls he'd done this with. He said I was number 12 this year. Number 12. I felt like I was going to be sick. The elevator doors opened. We stepped inside. It was just us and the mirror reflecting everything back at me. I looked at us side by side and felt like I was standing next to someone I didn't know at all. His phone buzzed again. He didn't even hide it now. Final results. 42% yes. 58% no. He looked at the screen for a long second. Then he looked at me with that same tight smile from earlier. He said he didn't think we should force it. Force it. Like we were trying to convince the internet. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened. He walked out ahead of me. I stood there for a second before following. He gave me a quick hug outside the building. Short, detached. Then he left. I watched him walk down the street, phone already in his hand, probably updating them. I got in my car and just sat there. My head felt loud. I'd opened the dating app and looked at his profile again. 10 minutes later, it was gone. Unmatched. I don't know what they were really voting on. Maybe it wasn't just about second dates. Maybe it was about control, about seeing how much someone could be shaped by outside opinions. What freaks me out the most isn't that he didn't like me. It's that my entire presence that night was reduced to percentages on a screen. Strangers deciding in real time if I was worth continuing. Sometimes I imagine that group chat still exists. Maybe they're voting on someone else right now. Maybe there's another girl sitting at a table somewhere, wondering why her date keeps smiling at his phone. I deleted the app that night. I should have ended it the second she corrected me about my own apartment. That's the moment that keeps replaying in my head. Not the creepy messages later. Not the photo. Just that tiny correction said so casually like she'd been there before. We matched on a random Wednesday night when I couldn't sleep. I was half watching some dumb cooking show and half scrolling through profiles. Her name was Marissa. Her photos were normal. Mirror selfie, dog picture, one hiking shot. Nothing dramatic. Her bio said she liked routine and clean spaces. That stuck out to me for some reason. We started messaging and it felt easy. She responded fast, but not too fast. Asked actual questions. Remembered small things I said. Like when I mentioned I worked from home most days, she asked what my setup looked like. I sent a picture of my desk. Nothing special. Just my laptop, second monitor, messy stack of notebooks. She said she liked seeing where people live. Said it tells you more than a bio ever could. I didn't think that was weird at first. People are curious. After 2 days of talking, she suggested we FaceTime before meeting. She said she preferred to see someone live instead of just pictures. Safety reasons. That sounded fair. We planned to call around 8 that night. I spent the whole afternoon cleaning my apartment, more than I ever have for someone who wasn't physically coming over. I don't even know why. Maybe I didn't want her judging me through a screen. I live in a mid-rise building downtown. Nothing fancy. Just one of those places with gray carpet hallways and a gym nobody uses. My unit is 4A, 4th floor, first door on the left when you get off the elevator. At 8 sharp, she called. Her face filled my screen. She looked exactly like her photos. Brown hair pulled back, neutral makeup, calm expression. She asked me to flip the camera around so she could see my place. I laughed and said it wasn't much, but I turned it anyway. I started in the living room. Small couch, TV on a stand, coffee table with a scratch on one corner. She asked me to move slower. She wanted to see the walls, the windows, the floor. I made a joke about her doing an inspection. She didn't laugh. She just kept watching. Then she asked to see the hallway, so I walked down the short hallway that leads to my bedroom and bathroom. I told her it's not that big, just a standard 4 layout. That's what she corrected me. She said it's 4 bits. Not in a confused way. Not like she misheard. It sounded certain. I frowned and told her no, it's definitely 4. I've been living here for almost a year. She tilted her head slightly and said the corner unit is 4 ADA. This one is 4 bits. My brain froze for a second, because she was right about the corner unit. 4 is technically the corner, but I always thought mine was 4 because that's what the leasing office told me when I signed. I walked back toward the front door and opened it. I angled the camera down at the number screwed into the wall beside it. 4 bits. I just stood there staring at it. I swear when I moved in, I thought it said 4A. I even had mail with 4 on it once. Or maybe I was remembering it wrong. I don't know. My head felt foggy all of a sudden. She said it's easy to mix them up. Easy to mix them up. I brushed it off and said I must have misremembered. But inside something felt off. How did she know the layout of my building? I asked if she had ever been here before. She said no, she just pays attention. The rest of the FaceTime felt strange. She asked to see my bedroom closet, my bathroom cabinets. She said she liked to know how someone organizes their space. At one point, she asked me to point the camera out the window. I hesitated but did it. You could see the parking lot and the street below. She asked which car was mine. I told her the blue Stetson in the second row. She nodded slowly like she was memorizing it. After about 30 minutes, she said she felt comfortable meeting in person now. We planned to grab coffee that Saturday at a place a few blocks away. When we hung out, I couldn't stop thinking about the room number thing. I went back to my lease agreement in my email. It clearly said unit 4 bits. So I had been wrong. But that didn't explain how she knew the building layout. I walked out into the hallway and looked around. There are only 4 units on my floor. 4 bits, 4C, Ford. You wouldn't know which one is the corner unless you've been there. I tried to convince myself maybe she dated someone in this building before. Maybe she had friends here. Still, something about her tone when she corrected me felt off. Like she wasn't guessing. Like she'd been standing in that hallway before. 2 days later, before our coffee date, I noticed something else. I got home from the gym around 7. As I walked toward my door, I saw a tiny piece of clear tape stuck just above the frame. I stared at it for a long time. I don't use tape on my door. I peeled it off and threw it away. Maybe maintenance had done something. Maybe it meant nothing. That night, she texted me asking if I'd moved the tape. My chest tightened. I asked what she meant. She said, never mind. Wrong person. Wrong person. I didn't reply after that. Saturday came and I almost canceled. A part of me wanted to see if I was overreacting. Maybe this was all coincidence stacked on coincidence. The coffee shop was busy and loud. I got there first and sat near the window. She walked in exactly on time. Same calm expression, same steady eyes. We ordered drinks and sat down. She asked how my week had been. Normal question. Normal tone. I studied her face for any sign of something off. Nothing obvious. Then she casually mentioned that the light in my hallway flickers sometimes. I stopped mid-sip. I asked what she meant. She said during our FaceTime she noticed it flicker twice. That was true. It does flicker occasionally. But the way she said it felt like she'd seen it more than once. I told her, yeah, it's been doing that lately. She nodded and said the building should really fix it, especially for people on the 4th floor. People on the 4th floor. Not people like you. Just people. I felt like she was testing me. After coffee, she suggested we walk. I agreed because I didn't want to seem paranoid. As we walked down the block, she pointed out my building before I did, said it blends in with the others, but the brick pattern is slightly darker near the entrance. She was right. I asked again if she'd ever been inside. She smiled faintly and said she hasn't been inside with me. That wording stuck. With me. We stopped outside the entrance. She looked up at the 4th floor windows and asked which one was mine. I pointed. She said that's what she thought. What she thought. I felt exposed standing there next to her, like she knew more about my life than I did. I told her I had to get back because I had work early. That wasn't true. I just wanted space. She didn't argue, just said she'd text me later. That night, around midnight, I got a FaceTime call from her. I didn't answer. A minute later, I got a photo. It was my building, taken from across the street. My 4th floor window was lit up. The caption said, "Nice lighting tonight." I didn't reply. I turned off all the lights in my apartment and stood in the dark, staring out the window carefully from the side. Across the street, a car idled with its headlights off. I couldn't see inside. My phone buzzed again. Another message. You forgot to close your bedroom blinds all the way. I dropped to the floor instantly, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I crawled toward my bedroom and checked. The blinds were slightly tilted open. I closed them fully and stayed on the floor for a long time. The car across the street drove away after a few minutes. I blocked her number that night, deleted the app, changed my locks the next morning even though there was no sign she had a key. A week later, I found another small strip of clear tape on my door. This time, I didn't remove it right away. I just stood there staring at the number beside my door. 4 bits. I know it's 4 bits now. I just don't know how she knew before I did. I didn't think a notification could make my hands go numb, but that's exactly what happened. 1 second I was pretending to laugh at something he said. The next my phone lit up on the table, and everything inside me just dropped. It wasn't even loud, just a soft buzz, but it felt like it echoed. We were sitting in this dim little jazz bar downtown. Not fancy, just dark enough that everyone looks better than they actually do. Small round tables, fake candles, old posters on the walls. He picked it because he said it had character. I thought that sounded cool. We'd been talking for about a week before meeting. His name was Daniel. Profile looked normal. Gym photos, but not too many. One with his niece. One at a food festival. Nothing alarming. He seemed steady, calm, not overly charming, just solid. I remember thinking he looked even better in person. Taller than I expected. Confident posture. Easy smile. The first hour was fine. Drinks, light jokes, basic background stuff. He asked about my job. I asked about his. He worked in tech. Something about cybersecurity consulting. I didn't fully get it, but I nodded like I did. He asked if I use dating apps often. I said here and there. He laughed and said they're full of weird features now. Safety buttons and check-ins and all that. That part didn't stick out at the time. Around 45 minutes in, my phone buzzed. It was face up on the table because I was waiting for my friend to confirm our brunch plans for the next day. I glanced down about automatically. It was a notification from the dating app we met on. Safety check. Are you comfortable? My heart skipped. I'd heard about this feature. Sometimes it sends random check-ins during dates so you can discreetly signal if you're not okay. I felt this weird mix of relief and confusion. Relief because it felt like backup. Confusion because nothing had technically gone wrong yet. He noticed me looking down and smiled. I picked up my phone casually, trying not to make it obvious. I tapped the notification. It opened the app instantly. Black screen. Loading circle. Then text appeared. He already knows you've opened this. I stared at it, thinking I read it wrong. He already knows you've opened this. My chest tightened so fast I thought I might choke. I looked up at him without meaning to. He was watching me. Not smiling now, just watching. I forced my face into something neutral and locked my phone. I placed it back on the table. He asked if everything was okay. Normal tone. Relax. I nodded and said yeah, just a spam notification. He tilted his head slightly and went back to talking about some trip he took last summer. But my brain wasn't listening anymore. What did that message mean? How would he know? I unlocked my phone again under the table. My hands were shaking. I opened the app directly this time instead of through the notification. It went straight to our chat. No safety screen. I scrolled up. Nothing unusual. Just our messages from the past week. I clicked on his profile. It looked normal. But at the top, there was a small gray line of text I swear wasn't there before. Active nearby. My stomach twisted. Of course he was nearby. We were on a date, but it felt like the app was emphasizing it. My phone buzzed again. Another notification. Safety check failed. Failed. I hadn't pressed anything. I hadn't selected uncomfortable or safe. I just opened it. I locked my phone again, trying to keep my breathing steady. He leaned back in his chair and studied me like he was analyzing something. Not in a creepy grin way, more like calculating. He asked if I was cold. I said no. He said my hands looked tense. I realized I was gripping my phone way too tight. I put it down again. The jazz band in the corner kept playing like nothing was happening. Glasses clinked. People laughed at other tables. The world felt normal except for this small bubble around us. I tried to think logically. Maybe the app was glitching. Maybe that message wasn't meant literally. Maybe it was some poorly worded feature. But the timing felt wrong. He picked up his own phone casually and glanced at it. My heart started pounding harder. What if he got a notification too? I imagined his screen lighting up with something like she opened the safety check. My phone buzzed a third time. I didn't want to look, but I did. New message from Daniel. But he hadn't typed anything in front of me. I opened it slowly. You don't have to test the features. I told you I work in cybersecurity. My vision blurred for a second. I looked up at him. He was smiling again, small, controlled. I hadn't sent anything. I hadn't typed anything. I hadn't even reacted out loud. I asked how he said that so fast. He said, "Sent what?" My throat felt dry. I showed him my screen. The message was gone. Our last message was from earlier that afternoon confirming the time. I scrolled up and down frantically. Nothing. I swear I saw it. I looked back at him. He was watching me carefully, like he was waiting to see how I'd react. I suddenly remembered what he said earlier about weird app features. I asked casually what exactly he does in cybersecurity. He launched into this explanation about testing vulnerabilities, finding weak points in systems, seeing how easy it is to manipulate user interfaces. Manipulate user interfaces. I felt like I was underwater. Another buzz. This time it wasn't from the dating app. It was a text from an unknown number. Stop checking your phone. I froze. I slowly looked up. He was holding his drink with both hands, not typing, not looking at his screen. But his phone was face down on the table. I didn't respond to the text. My phone buzzed again. It's rude. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might be sick. I looked around the room. Nobody seemed to be paying attention to us. I started wondering if someone else in the bar was involved. Maybe this wasn't just him. I opened my settings quickly and checked if my phone was connected to any unfamiliar Bluetooth devices. There was one listed. Edge speaker. We were in a jazz bar. That could have been normal. But below it, there was another device. Kiki Consulting. His initials were Kiki. I disconnected immediately. My phone buzzed again. Connection lost. I almost dropped it. He leaned forward slightly and asked if I was feeling overwhelmed. His voice was softer now, almost concerned. I nodded slowly. He said sometimes people get anxious when they realize how much information their devices share. I felt exposed in a way I can't fully explain, like every tap I made was visible to him. I told him I needed some air. He didn't stop me. I walked toward the exit, my legs feeling weak. As soon as I stepped outside, my phone buzzed again. Safety check. Do you need help leaving? I stared at it, terrified to open it again. Another text from the unknown number. You're overreacting. I blocked the number immediately. Then I turned off my phone completely. I didn't look back at the bar. I just kept walking down the street until I reached a busy intersection with lots of people. I turned my phone back on about 10 minutes later. No new notifications. I opened the dating app. His profile was gone. Not unmatched. Gone. I went into my app settings and checked the safety feature history. There was no record of a safety check being sent that night. No log, no notification history. Like it never happened. I deleted the app on the spot. The next day, I took my phone to a repair shop and asked them to check for spyware. They didn't find anything obvious, said everything looked clean. But sometimes when my phone buzzes randomly and there's no notification, I think about that screen. He already knows you opened this. And the way he watched me when I looked down. I don't use dating apps anymore. I didn't even notice the exact second Shiva matched me. That's the creepy part. We were sitting across from each other, sharing fries, talking about music, and somehow in the middle of all that she erased me from her phone like it was part of the plan. We met on an app that markets itself as being smarter than the others. It claims it studies your habits, your swipes, how long you look at a profile, what time of night you're most active. It promises better matches because it knows you better than you know yourself. I thought that was kind of cool. Slightly weird, but cool. Her name was Elise. Short dark hair, sharp jawline, intense eyes. Her profile had this line that said, "I trust data more than people." I thought it was a joke. Or maybe just one of those sarcastic bios people write to sound different. We matched late on a Thursday. By Friday morning, she had already sent me a breakdown of why she thought we were compatible. Not in a cute astrology way, in a numbers way. She mentioned shared interests, similar response times, overlapping location data patterns. She said our activity windows aligned. I should have been creeped out then, but it felt kind of flattering, like she actually studied me. We agreed to meet Sunday afternoon at this outdoor food market on the edge of the city. Lots of little stalls, lawn picnic tables, live acoustic music in the background. Super casual. Bright daylight. Safe. I got there first and grabbed the table under one of those striped tents. It was worn out. Crowded but not packed. She showed up right on time, wearing black jeans and a gray top. No makeup that I could tell. She looked exactly like her photos. Maybe even more intense in person. The first 30 minutes were surprisingly normal. We walked around, got tacos from a stand that charged $12 for 2 tiny ones, laughed about how overpriced everything was. She had a dry sense of humor. Kind of blunt, but funny. We sat down with our food and started talking about work. She was in data analytics. Something about optimizing engagement systems for a tech firm. She talked about patterns like they were personalities, like numbers had moods. At some point, she pulled out her phone and opened the dating app. I joked about her checking her other options mid-date. She said no, she just needed to adjust something. I didn't think much of it. I took a bite of my taco and looked around at the crowd. Then she looked up at me and said, "Good. Now the algorithm won't interfere." I blinked at her. She turned her phone toward me. Our chat was gone. It said you were no longer matched. I stared at the screen, confused. She said she unmatched me on purpose. Said that when two people remain matched, the system keeps tracking their interactions, measuring message frequency, date reports, follow-up behavior. She said it subtly influences what you see next. Who gets boosted? Who fades out? I told her that sounded paranoid. She shook her head slightly and said it's not paranoia if it's coded. The way she said it made my stomach twist a little. She explained that by unmatching me while we were physically together, she removed the app's ability to observe the rest of the interaction. No post-date prompts. No feedback forms. No subtle nudges asking if I want to message her again. She said now it's just us. Raw data. Raw data. I laughed awkwardly, thinking she was exaggerating. But she wasn't smiling. She leaned forward slightly and asked me how often I check the app when I'm bored, how long I usually spend looking at profiles, whether I swipe right more at night. The questions felt different now, less like curiosity, more like research. I asked why she cared so much about the algorithm. She said because it manipulates people more than they realize. It rewards certain behaviors, punches others. It decides who seems desirable based on patterns that users don't even see. She said she doesn't like being ranked. Ranked. She pulled out her phone again and opened a notes app. There were bullet points with timestamps. Arrival time, 2:03 p.m. First laugh, 2:11 p.m. Eye contact duration estimate. My chest tightened. I asked if she was seriously taking notes about me. She said she tracks everything, not just me, everyone. She said she's running her own model. I felt I was sitting across from someone who wasn't here for a date at all, just gathering input. She asked if I noticed how often I touched my phone. I said not really. She said 7 times in the first 20 minutes. I didn't even remember doing that. She asked if I felt more relaxed after she unmatched me. I hesitated. I kind of did, which freaked me out even more. She smiled faintly and said that's the point. Remove the external observer and behavior changes. I looked around the market, suddenly aware of how many people were on their phones, taking photos, checking notifications. She asked if I trusted that the app only uses the data it claims to. I said I never really thought about it. She nodded like that was the answer she expected. Then she said something that made my skin crawl. She said she built a script that predicts when matches will ghost her based on micro-behaviors in the first meeting. Micro-behaviors. She listed examples: foot direction, blink rate, speech tempo shifts. I shifted in my seat without meaning to. She noticed. She smiled again slightly. She said I'm at a 62% probability of gradual fade. I asked what that meant. She said it means I'll probably text less over the next week before disappearing entirely. I felt exposed in a way that's hard to describe, like she had already decided the arc of our interaction before it even finished. I told her maybe I wouldn't ghost. She shrugged and said that would skew the model, but anomalies happen. Anomalies. I suddenly realized she hadn't asked much about me as a person. Not really, just observable traits. I asked why she even uses the app if she hates the algorithm. She said she needs a steady input stream. Input stream. The way she said it made it clear she didn't see these as dates. They were data points. I asked how many input streams she had running. She said currently 6 active, but she cycles them out weekly. Cycles them out. I felt my appetite disappear. She pulled out her phone again and opened her camera. I asked what she was doing. She said baseline capture. She snapped a photo of me before I could react. I felt my face flush. She said she compares facial tension from beginning to end of date to measure comfort variance. Comfort variance. I pushed my tray away. She tilted her head and said the spike in your discomfort just now is interesting. I stood up. She didn't try to stop me. She just calmly closed her notes app. As I stepped back from the table, she said something that's been stuck in my head ever since. She said now that we're unmatched, you'll never show up in my stack again, which means whatever happens next won't affect my visibility score. Visibility score. I asked what she meant by whatever happens next. She didn't answer directly. She just looked at me with that same steady expression and said it's better when the system isn't watching. I left. I walked straight out of the market without looking back. That night, I read through the app's privacy policy for the first time ever. All the tracking language, engagement metrics, behavioral signals. I deleted the app. A week later, I saw her again. Not in person. Her profile popped up on a different dating app. Different photos, slightly different bio, same eyes. I stared at it for a long time. Then I closed the app without swiping. I don't know if she predicted that too. I knew something was off when he brought a folder to a first date. Not a laptop bag, not a backpack. An actual thin blue folder tucked under his arm like he was about to give a presentation in class. And the worst part is I almost convinced myself it was normal. We matched on a Sunday night when I couldn't sleep. He messaged first. His opener wasn't cheesy. It was simple. He said he liked spontaneous connections. Said the best conversation to the ones you don't plan. That sounded refreshing. Most guys either try too hard or barely try at all. His name was Ryan. Clean haircut, kind eyes, one picture of him hiking, one at a coffee shop with a book. His bio mentioned psychology podcasts and late night drives. Nothing alarming. We started talking, and it flowed easily. We joked about bad first dates. He said he once met someone who brought her mom. I told him about a guy who spent 20 minutes explaining cryptocurrency. We went back and forth like that for a few days. He replied quickly, but not obsessively. He remembered small details. Like when I mentioned I hate olives, he brought it up again later in a joke. It felt natural. After 4 days of messaging, he suggested meeting at this quiet bookstore cafe about 15 minutes from where I live. It's one of those places with mismatched chairs and soft lighting. You can hear the espresso machine from across the room. I got there a little early. I always do. I ordered a latte for $6 and sat near the back where it was less crowded. He walked in right on time. First impression, he looked exactly like his photos. Average height. Neutral expression that turned into a smile when he saw me. Then I noticed the folder. He held it casually, like it wasn't weird. We sat down and started talking. At first, it felt normal. He asked about my week. I asked about his. He mentioned a stressful project at work. I told him about my friend's birthday party. About 15 minutes in, he leaned back and said he really values spontaneous connections. Said he thinks chemistry shows up in subtle patterns. Subtle patterns. That phrase stuck. Then he tapped the folder lightly and said he brought something. My stomach tightened. He opened it slowly. Inside were printed screenshots. Our messages. Every single one from the first hello to the one that morning confirming the time. They weren't just printed. They were highlighted. Yellow lines across certain sentences. Blue circles around specific words. Handwritten notes in the margins. I felt my face get hot instantly. I asked what that was. He said he likes to review conversations before meeting someone. Helps him understand the flow, the subtext. Subtext. He slid one of the pages toward me. I saw my own words staring back at me on paper. The first message I sent, the joke about olives, the story about my college roommate. Some of my sentences were highlighted. Next to one, he had written self-deprecating humor defense mechanism. Next to another, avoids direct compliment. My heart started pounding. I told him that was kind of intense. He smiled gently and said he didn't want to rely on memory alone. Memory alone. He flicked to another page. This one had timestamps circled. Response delay pattern noted. I realized he had tracked how long it took me to reply. He had written things like 7 minutes, likely multitasking. 42 minutes, possible social engagement. I felt exposed in a way I can't fully explain, like something private had been taken apart and pinned down. He said he finds it fascinating how people reveal themselves in casual text, that spontaneity isn't random, it's structured. Structured. He pointed to a highlighted part where I had said I love spontaneous road trips. In the margin, he wrote romanticizes unpredictability while maintaining controlled schedule. I didn't even know what that meant. I tried to laugh it off, but my laugh sounded forced even to me. He kept flipping pages. At one point, he showed me a section where I used 3 exclamation points in a row. He had circled it and written heightened enthusiasm, possibly performative. Performative. I felt like I was being graded. I asked why he printed it instead of just looking at it on his phone. He said physical copies feel more real. Harder to ignore patterns when they're tangible. Tangible. He leaned forward and asked if I wanted to see his notes on compatibility. I shook my head slightly, but he kept going anyway. He had made categories. Emotional availability, humor alignment, avoidance tendencies. Under avoidance tendencies, there were 3 bullet points referencing things I had said about past relationships. I didn't even remember saying half of it until I read it on the page. He said he doesn't believe in wasting time. He wants to know what he's stepping into. Stepping into. I suddenly felt like I was in an interview instead of a date. I asked if he does this with everyone. He said only the promising ones. Promising ones. He flipped to the last page. There in the bottom corner was a small printed photo of my profile picture. Next to it, he had written preliminary assessment positive but cautious. Preliminary assessment. I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. He asked if seeing it made me uncomfortable. I said yes. He nodded thoughtfully and wrote something down in the margin. Visible discomfort at structured analysis. I almost laughed because it felt so unreal. I asked what he planned to do with the folder after tonight. He said he keeps them. Keeps them. I imagined a stack of folders somewhere in his apartment, labeled names, dates, maybe numbered. I asked how many he had. He paused for a second and said 7. 7. He said it helps him refine his approach. Refine his approach. I suddenly thought about all the times he mirrored my phrasing in our texts. How he would match my tone exactly. If I used a short sentence, he would too. If I sent a longer paragraph, he'd respond with one around the same length. It hadn't felt weird at the time. It felt compatible. Now it felt studied. I asked if any of the 7 worked out. He said 2 made it to second stage. Second stage. I didn't ask what that meant. He reached across the table and tapped one of the highlighted lines. It was where I said I like feeling understood. He said he thinks he understands me better than most people already. My chest tightened. I pushed the pages back toward him. I told him this didn't feel spontaneous. He looked almost confused. He said spontaneity is just well-predicted reaction. Well-predicted reaction. The way he said it made my skin crawl. I stood up. He didn't try to stop me. He calmly gathered the pages, slid them back into the folder, and zipped it closed. As I walked toward the exit, I felt his eyes on me. That night, I had opened the app to block him. Our chat was still there. Every message. But now when I scrolled through it, I couldn't see it the same way. I could almost picture which lines he'd highlighted. I blocked him and deleted the conversation. A week later, I got a letter in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single printed screenshot of our very first message. The one where he said he liked spontaneous connections. It was highlighted in yellow. I didn't think a single question could flip the entire vibe of a date, but it did. Everything was smooth until she asked if I lived alone. The second I said no, her whole face changed. Not angry. Not surprised. Just disappointed. Like I had just failed something important without knowing there was even a test. We matched on a Monday night. Her name was Tara. Her profile was simple but kind of intense. Not in a dramatic way, just very direct. Her bio said she values independence and privacy above all else. Her pictures were all taken indoors. Clean backgrounds, soft lighting, nothing messy, nothing chaotic. We started talking, and she was quick with responses. Not overly friendly, but interested. She asked focused questions. What do you do after work? How often do you travel? Do you prefer staying in or going out? It felt like she was building a profile in her head. I didn't mind at first. I figured she just knew what she wanted. After a few days, she suggested we meet at this quiet tea house in a neighborhood I'd never been to before. It wasn't trendy or crowded. Just a narrow space with small wooden tables and shelves lined with jars of loose-leaf tea. Very calm. Almost too calm. I got there first and ordered something random for $5 because I had no idea what half the menu meant. She walked in a few minutes later. She looked exactly like her photos. Long dark hair, serious expression, minimal makeup. She sat down and studied me for a second before smiling slightly. Not a big smile, just enough. The first half hour was normal. We talked about work, music, random stuff about our childhoods. She seemed sharp, observant, like she noticed little details most people ignore. Then she asked where I live. I told her the neighborhood. She asked if it was an apartment or house. I said apartment. She nodded slowly. Then she asked if I lived alone. I didn't think twice about it. I said no, I have a roommate. We split rent. Saves money. That's when it happened. Her expression changed instantly. The warmth that was barely there disappeared. Her shoulders stiffened slightly. Her eyes narrowed just a bit. It wasn't dramatic. If you weren't paying attention, you wouldn't catch it. But I caught it. She looked down at her tea and stirred it even though it didn't need stirring. I asked if that was a problem. She said she prefers men who live alone. Prefers. I laughed lightly and said I probably will next year, just waiting until my lease is up. She didn't laugh. She asked how often my roommate is home. That question felt heavier than it should have. I said he works weird hours, sometimes nights, sometimes days. She nodded slowly like she was calculating something. She asked if he has people over often. I said not really. She asked if he locks his door at night. That one made me pause. I said, yeah, I guess. She leaned back slightly and looked at me like she was reassessing everything. I tried to shift the topic, but she kept circling back to it, asking about the layout of the apartment, how many entrances, whether we share a bathroom. It started to feel less like curiosity and more like a checklist. I asked why it mattered so much. She said privacy is important. Privacy. The way she said it felt deeper than just not wanting awkward roommate interactions. After that, the conversation never fully recovered. She kept glancing at me in this analytical way, like she was deciding if I was still worth her time. We finished our tea. She didn't suggest extending the date. No walk, no second spot. Just said she had somewhere to be. We walked outside together. It was already getting dark. The street was quiet. She stood there for a second and looked at me. Then she said something that stuck with me. She said I almost fit. Almost fit. I asked what that meant. She didn't answer directly, just said maybe timing is off. Then she left. I stood there feeling weirdly rejected over something so small. That night, I told my roommate about it. He laughed and said maybe she wanted to move in fast. I laughed too, but it didn't feel funny. 2 days later, I got a message from her on the app. She asked if my roommate had any plans to move out soon. I told her no. She didn't respond. The next morning, her profile was gone. Unmatched. I shrugged it off and moved on. About a week later, I came home late from work. My roommate wasn't home. His car wasn't in the lot. As I walked up to our building, I noticed someone standing across the street. Couldn't see their face clearly, just a figure near the corner. I didn't think much of it until I unlocked the building door and heard footsteps behind me. I turned around. No one. Maybe they crossed the street. I went upstairs to our unit and unlocked the door. Everything looked normal. I dropped my bag and went to the kitchen, grabbed water, checked my phone. A message request from an unknown number. Does he always work nights on Tuesdays? My heart started pounding. I didn't reply. A second message came through. I was hoping tonight would be quiet. I stared at the screen trying to process it. Another message. You said he sometimes stays out late. My mouth went dry. I hadn't told anyone else that. Only her. I walked to the living room window slowly and peeked through the blinds. Across the street, near the corner, someone was standing under the streetlight. Same height as her, same posture. My phone buzzed again. I prefer when they live alone. I felt cold all over. I locked the door and double-checked the chain. Another buzz. It complicates things. I texted my roommate to ask where he was. He said he'd be home in about 20 minutes. 20 minutes felt like forever. My phone buzzed again. If he wasn't there, this would be easier. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I called the number. It went straight to voicemail. I blocked it. I turned off the lights in the living room and stayed low near the couch. I kept watching the street through the smallest gap in the blinds. The figure didn't move. 15 minutes passed. Then headlights turned onto our street. My roommate's car. The figure stepped back into the shadows. My phone buzzed one last time before I blocked the number completely. Requirement not met. I watched as my roommate parked and got out of his car. When he reached the building entrance, the figure was gone. I'd never saw her again. But sometimes when my roommate mentions he might move out next year, I think about her face when I said I didn't live alone. Like I failed something important without even knowing what the prize was. I should have trusted the tiny voice in my head when he kept angling his phone toward me all night. Not in a creepy, obvious way, just subtle enough to ignore, like he was checking his reflection or adjusting the brightness. I didn't realize until later that he was framing shots. We matched on a Thursday afternoon while I was waiting in line at the grocery store. His name was Logan. His profile had this confident, laid-back vibe. Gym photo, dog photo, one at a rooftop party with city lights behind him. His bio said he loved documenting life as it happens. That sounded harmless. Lots of people post everything. We messaged for a few days. He was charming in a fast way. Quick replies, little compliments, funny observations about my profile. He said I looked like someone who doesn't realize how interesting she is. I rolled my eyes but smiled anyway. He suggested meeting at this waterfront boardwalk about 20 minutes from where I live. It's one of those places with string lights along the railings, food trucks parked in a row, and people walking dogs at sunset. Crowded but not chaotic. I got there first and stood near the railing watching boats move slowly across the water. He texted that he was parking. When he walked up, he looked exactly like his photos. Athletic build, confident posture, easy grin. He gave me a quick hug like we'd known each other longer than we had. The first hour felt normal. We grabbed tacos from a truck for $14 and sat on a bench overlooking the water. He told stories about random trips he'd taken, showed me pictures on his phone from hiking trails and random city streets. I noticed he took a lot of photos of everything, his food, the sky, the crowd. At one point, he said he likes capturing moments before they disappear. That line stuck in my head later. We walked along the boardwalk as the sun started setting. He asked about my job and my friends, where I grew up. Nothing too deep, just enough to keep it flowing. Then he said we should take a selfie. I hesitated for a split second, but it felt normal. People do that on dates now. Proof of life or whatever. He held his phone up high, angled slightly above us. I leaned in. We both smiled. He snapped it. I expected him to maybe send it to me or just keep it. Instead, he immediately started typing on his phone. I asked what he was doing. He said just posting it real quick. My stomach tightened. I said posting where? He said just a private story. Nothing major. I didn't want to seem uptight, so I let it go. We kept walking. He kept checking his phone, smiling slightly, typing again. I felt this weird flicker of unease but couldn't pinpoint why. About 10 minutes later, my own phone buzzed. It was a message request on Instagram from someone I didn't know. It said, "Are you okay?" I frowned and ignored it. Then another one came. "Link twice if you need help." My heart skipped. I opened Instagram. At the top of my screen was a notification that someone had mentioned me in a story. It was him. I tapped it. There was our selfie. We looked normal, smiling, sunset behind us. But the caption underneath said she doesn't know yet. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. The story had dozens of views already, little profile icons at the bottom. I felt exposed in a way I can't fully explain, like I had just walked into something staged. I looked up at him. He was watching me carefully. Not smiling this time, just observing. I asked what that caption meant. He shrugged lightly and said it's just a joke. A joke. My phone buzzed again. Another message request. What's he planning? I scrolled through the viewers list on his story. Most were private accounts, usernames with numbers and random words. Some of them were sending me messages. They all sounded concerned. One said, "I've been following him for months. Please be careful." My hands started shaking. I looked back at him and asked how many people were on his private story. He said a small group. A small group. I opened the viewer list again. There were at least 70 names. That's not small. Another message came through. "Did he tell you about the game?" Game. I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. I looked at him and asked what game. He tilted his head slightly and said, "Relax." Relax. He reached for my phone gently like he wanted to see what I was looking at. I pulled it back instinctively. He laughed softly and said, "I hate when people ruin surprises." Surprises. I asked what surprise. He looked at the water for a second and then back at me. He said he runs a social experiment page. Social experiment. He said his followers vote on outcomes. My chest tightened. I asked what kind of outcomes. He smiled slightly. He said, "Don't worry, nothing illegal." That did not make me feel better. My phone buzzed again. New message. "If he takes you somewhere else, say no." I looked around the boardwalk. Suddenly, everything felt staged. Like people could be watching us not just in person, but through their screens. I opened his profile. His account was public. I scrolled. There were dozens of posts. Pictures of him with different girls. Each caption similar. "She doesn't know yet. Wait for it. Place your bets." My heart started pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I tapped one of the older posts. In the comments, people were guessing things. How long until she finds out? Will she leave or stay? Does she notice the pattern? Pattern. I scrolled further down. There were follow-up posts. Some showed the girl looking upset. Some showed empty benches. One showed a screenshot of a text message from a girl saying, "Never contact me again." The captions were always cryptic. Experiment complete. Threshold reached. I felt sick. I looked up at him and asked how many girls he's done this with. He didn't answer directly. He just said some are more aware than others. More aware. Another message came through from one of the viewers. He usually tells them at the end. Tells them what? My brain was racing. I asked him what happens next. He smiled slightly and said that depends on you. Depends on me. I felt trapped in a way that didn't make sense physically. We were in a public place. People everywhere. Boats passing. Kids laughing. But it felt like the entire moment was controlled by an audience I couldn't see. He reached for his phone again and typed something. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. He had posted another story. I opened it. It was a poll over our selfie. Does she suspect anything? Yes. Not yet. My throat went dry. The votes were already coming in. I looked at him and said I'm leaving. He didn't try to stop me. He just watched. As I walked away down the boardwalk, my phone kept buzzing with message requests from strangers telling me to block him. When I reached my car, I checked his profile again. The story was gone. Our selfie was deleted. His entire account was gone. Like it never existed. I sat in my car shaking, trying to process it. Later that night, I searched his username again. Nothing. But sometimes when I scroll through random accounts, I see similar captions on different profiles. She doesn't know yet. And I wonder how many other girls are smiling in selfies they don't realize are part of something else. I didn't think someone talking about ghosting could actually make my stomach drop, but the way she told it made it feel less like dating drama and more like a warning. Not a funny story. Not a rant. A warning. We matched on a Tuesday night. Her name was Camila. Her profile had this bold energy to it. Direct eye contact in every photo. No filters. Her bio said she values honesty and hates games. I thought that was fair. Everyone says they hate ghosting. We messaged for about a week. She was intense, but in a focused way. She asked real questions. What are you looking for? What are your deal breakers? How do you usually end things if you're not feeling it? That last question should have tipped me off. I said I usually just tell the person politely if it's not working. She replied that she respected that, said disappearing is coward behavior. Coward behavior. We agreed to meet at this late-night dessert cafe that stays open until midnight. It's the kind of place with neon signs and milkshakes piled high with whipped cream. Loud but cozy. I got there first and grabbed a booth near the back. It was Friday night, so it was busy, but not overwhelming. She walked in wearing a black jacket and jeans, confident stride. She didn't look around nervously like most first dates. She walked straight to me like she already knew exactly where I'd be sitting. First impression, she looked even better than her pictures. Sharp features, steady gaze. We ordered milkshakes that cost $9 each and started talking. At first, it was easy. She had a sarcastic sense of humor. Told stories about work, about her friends. She was animated but controlled, like she knew exactly how she was coming across. About 30 minutes in, she brought up ghosting again. She said she doesn't understand how someone can just vanish. I nodded and said it sucks. She leaned forward slightly and said she makes sure it doesn't happen to her. The way she said it made me pause. I asked what she meant. She said the last guy who tried it learned a lesson. Learned a lesson. She said it casually, like she was talking about a parking ticket. I laughed awkwardly and asked what happened. She started describing it in detail. She said they went on 3 dates. Everything seemed fine. Then one day, he just stopped replying. No explanation. Nothing. She said at first she gave him space. Then she decided she deserved closure. Closure. She said she went back through their messages and noticed small details he had mentioned. The gym he goes to, the coffee shop near his office, the fact that he plays pickup basketball on Wednesdays. As she was talking, I realized she wasn't telling like a sad story. She was telling like a case study. She said she didn't confront him directly at first. She just showed up at the gym one evening, watched from across the room. Watched. My chest tightened. She said he looked surprised to see her but tried to act normal, said he'd been busy. She said she smiled and told him she understood. Then she started showing up more often, not always talking to him, just being there, sitting at the cafe he liked, standing near the court on Wednesdays. She described his reactions in detail, how he started looking over his shoulder more, how he switched gyms after 2 weeks. I felt cold listening to her. She said he thought he could disappear, but she doesn't let people rewrite reality like that. Rewrite reality. I asked what she eventually did. She said she finally asked him directly why he stopped responding. She said he apologized, said he didn't know how to end it. She said she appreciated the honesty. But then she added something that made my heart pound. She said she kept showing up for another month, just to make sure he understood. Understood what? She looked at me and said that people don't get to treat her like she doesn't exist. Her eyes were steady, not angry, just certain. I forced a small laugh and said that's intense. She shrugged and said some people only learn through discomfort. Discomfort. I suddenly became very aware of everything I had told her over the past week. Where I live, the gym I go to, the bar my friends and I hang out at. I asked if she still talks to that guy. She said no. He moved. Moved? She took a slow sip of her milkshake and looked at me over the rim of the glass. Then she said she always makes her expectations clear now. I nodded carefully. She asked if I've ever ghosted anyone. I hesitated for half a second too long. She noticed. She asked again. I admitted that maybe once or twice in college, nothing serious. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. She said that's good to know. Good to know. The rest of the date felt different after that. Every question she asked felt like it had weight, like she was mapping my habits. She asked what time I usually go to the gym. She asked if my job has flexible hours. She asked if my apartment building has security. That one made my stomach twist. I tried to steer the conversation back to something lighter, but she kept circling back to accountability, to how people reveal their character in endings. Endings. When we finally stood up to leave, she hugged me briefly. It felt firm, deliberate. She said she had a good time and hopes I'm not the disappearing type. I said I'm not. I wasn't sure if I meant it or if I was just afraid. That night, I lay in bed staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to text her immediately just to avoid any misunderstanding. Another part of me felt unsettled. The next day, she texted first, said she had fun, asked when I'm free next. I stared at the message for a long time. I typed a response, deleted it, typed again. I told her I'd let her know after checking my schedule. She responded almost instantly. Take your time. I'm very patient. Very patient. A few hours later, I got another message. By the way, your gym closes at 10 on weekends, right? My chest tightened. I asked how she knew that. She said you mentioned it. Maybe I did. I tried to scroll back through our chat to see if I had. I couldn't find it. That night, when I went to the gym, I kept glancing toward the entrance. She didn't show up, but I couldn't focus. 2 days later, I still hadn't confirmed the second date. I was busy with work, genuinely, but also unsure. Around 8 p.m. that evening, I got a message. I saw you were online earlier. My heart skipped. The app shows activity status sometimes. I hadn't realized she was watching it. I replied that I was just checking notifications. She sent another message. Just remember what happened to the last guy. My throat went dry. I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A photo. It was the entrance of my apartment building, taken from across the street. I sat frozen on my couch. Another message. Relax, just making sure you don't forget I exist. I don't think I slept that night. I knew the date was going downhill before the food even came, but I didn't expect it to turn into whatever that was. It started small, just him staring at his phone too much. Then the whispering started. Every time the screen flickered, he'd mutter not again under his breath like he was reliving something. We matched on a Sunday night. His name was Evan. Profile looked normal. Soft smile, glasses, one picture at a farmer's market holding a bouquet of flowers like he thought it was funny. His bio said he works in app development and believes technology connects people in beautiful ways. That line stuck with me for some reason. We talked for about 5 days. He seemed thoughtful, not overly flirty. Asked deeper questions about what makes me feel safe, what my ideal relationship dynamic looks like. I thought he was just mature. We agreed to meet at this small ramen place tucked between a laundromat and a vague shop. It's cozy, dim lighting, only about 10 tables. The kind of place where you can hear the kitchen clatter in the back. I got there first and grabbed a booth against the wall. It was raining outside, so the windows were fogged up. Very quiet night. He walked in right on time. First impression, he looked exactly like his photos. Neat, slightly awkward posture, a friendly smile. We ordered ramen around $13 each and started talking. For the first 15 minutes, it was fine. He asked about my job, my hobbies, the usual stuff. He seemed engaged. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face changed instantly. Not anger, not fear, just frustration. He unlocked it, stared at the screen, and then whispered, "Not again." I thought maybe it was a work thing. He refreshed whatever was on his screen. I saw a glimpse of a familiar interface. It was the dating app. I laughed lightly and asked if he was checking his matches mid-date. He said, "No, it's glitching." Glitching. He kept refreshing it over and over. Each time the screen flickered, he whispered, "Not again." I tried to keep the conversation going, but he was distracted. I asked what was wrong. He said sometimes the app resets. Resets. I didn't know what that meant. Our food came. He barely touched his. He kept swiping down on the screen to refresh. Each time, his shoulders tensed. I finally leaned slightly to see. His profile picture was there at the top, but below it, the match list was empty. Completely empty. I asked if he had a lot of matches before. He nodded slowly. Then he refreshed again. The list flickered, and one name appeared. Mine. Just mine. Then it disappeared. He inhaled sharply and whispered, "Not again." My stomach tightened. I asked what was happening. He said sometimes it clears everyone. Everyone. I said maybe it's just a bug. He shook his head slightly and said it only happens when he meets someone in person. Only when he meets someone. I felt a weird chill crawl up my arms. He refreshed again. This time, my profile picture popped up briefly in his match list. Then it glitched, stretched oddly across the screen, and vanished. His breathing got heavier. He said it's doing it again. Doing what again? I asked what he meant. He stared at me for a second like he was debating whether to tell me. Then he said this happened with the last two girls. Last two girls. He said they matched. They chatted. They met up. Then during the date, the app glitched and their match disappeared. I said maybe they unmatched him. He shook his head. He said it wasn't that. He said their profiles disappeared entirely, like they never existed. I tried to laugh it off and said apps glitch all the time. But he wasn't laughing. He refreshed again. This time, the entire screen went white for a second. He whispered, "Not again," louder than before. A few people at nearby tables glanced over. I asked if he wanted to step outside to fix it. He nodded quickly. We stepped out into the rain under the small awning. He held his phone close to his face and refreshed again. I saw it clearly this time. His match list loaded. Dozens of names. Then they flickered. One by one they vanished. Until only one remained. Mine. My profile picture stared back from his screen. He looked up at me slowly. Then my name glitched. The letters distorted slightly. And then my profile disappeared too. His match list was empty. He exhaled slowly and whispered, "Not again." I felt exposed standing there in the rain. I asked what that meant. He said every time it happens, something changes. Changes how? He said the first time the girl stopped responding after the date, completely, like she never knew him. I said that's just ghosting. He shook his head. He said he saw her again a week later at a grocery store. She didn't recognize him. Didn't recognize him. He said he tried to say hi. She looked at him like he was a stranger. My heart started pounding. He refreshed again. The screen stayed blank. He said the second time the girl blocked him on everything right after the app glitched. Blocked him everywhere. I asked what happened after that. He hesitated. Then said he started seeing her profile again a few weeks later. Brand new account. New pictures. Like the old one had never existed. My stomach twisted. I pulled out my own phone slowly and opened the app. Our chat was still there. But when I clicked on his profile, it wouldn't load. Just a spinning circle. I tried refreshing. My screen flickered. Our conversation disappeared. I stared at my phone. No matches. Empty. My chest tightened. I looked back at him. He was watching my face carefully. He asked if mine just reset. I nodded slowly. He whispered, "Not again," one more time, softer this time. Like he was exhausted. I felt like the ground wasn't stable. I reopened the app. It logged me out. I tried logging back in. Error. I looked up at him and said, "This is weird." He nodded. He said every time the app resets during a date, the connection doesn't survive outside of it. Connection. I asked what he meant. He said after this, "You probably won't remember matching me." My throat went dry. I said, "I'm standing right here." He gave a small sad smile and said, "For now." For now. My phone buzzed. A notification from the app. Account not found. I felt dizzy. I tried searching his name on social media. Nothing came up. No results. I looked back at him. He seemed almost calm now, like he was expecting this. He said it's happening faster this time. Faster. I stepped back slightly. I asked what happens next. He looked at his blank match list and then back at me. He said, "Usually they leave." Usually they leave. I didn't know what else to do. I told him I needed to go home. He nodded. No argument. I walked to my car in the rain, my heart racing. When I got inside, I checked my phone again. The dating app icon was gone. Completely gone from my home screen. I don't remember deleting it. I sat there for a long time trying to piece everything together. Later that night, I tried to tell my friend about the date. I couldn't remember his name. Just that he kept whispering, "Not again." And for some reason, that part won't leave my head. I didn't think my name would ever look threatening on a phone screen, but seeing it in that folder made my stomach flip. It wasn't just my name. It was my name with a date next to it, and a blank space after the word outcome. We matched on a Saturday afternoon while I was half watching a game and half swiping out of boredom. Her name was Jessica. Profile looked polished but not fake. Clean photos, confident smile, one picture of her at a museum, one hiking, one sitting in a cafe with sunglasses on. Her bio said she believes in learning from patterns. That line felt random at the time. We started talking, and she was sharp, not overly flirty, more analytical. She asked questions like, "What did you learn from your last relationship, and what are you trying not to repeat?" It felt deeper than usual app talk. After a week of messaging, she suggested meeting at his quiet wine bar downtown. It's dim, brick walls, candles on every table, kind of intimate without being too intense. I got there first and ordered a glass for $11 just to have something in front of me. She walked in 5 minutes later. First impression, she looked even better than her photos. Calm, steady, very direct eye contact. We started talking and it flowed easily. She had this way of listening that made it feel like every word mattered. She'd tilt her head slightly and hold eye contact a second longer than most people. About 40 minutes in, she said something about documenting growth. I asked what she meant. She smiled and said she keeps track of her dating life so she doesn't repeat mistakes. I thought she meant journaling. Then she pulled out her phone. She unlocked it and opened her photos. At first, it was normal stuff. Pictures of sunsets, food, her dog. Then she opened a folder. It was labeled simply names. My stomach tightened a little. Inside were dozens of subfolders. Each one had a man's name, first and last, with dates, like mark 3.12 to 4.02. And under each name, smaller text. Outcome, ghosted. Outcome, short term. Outcome, blocked. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. She scrolled slowly. Some names had longer date ranges, some just a single day. Then she scrolled to the bottom. There was a folder with my name. Just my first name, since that's all she had from the app. Next to it was that night's date. The outcome line was blank. My chest felt tight. I asked when she made that. She said earlier that afternoon. Earlier that afternoon, before the date even started. She said she creates a folder once a first date is confirmed. Just in case. Just in case of what? She tapped into one of the older folders. Inside were screenshots of conversations, selfies from dates, notes typed in the Notes app. Things like hesitates when discussing future, avoids defining terms, likely conflict avoidant. It felt less like memories and more like case files. I tried to laugh it off and said that's organized. She didn't laugh. She said data prevents disappointment. Data. She scrolled into another folder. This one had a picture of a guy sitting at a restaurant table. I recognized the place. She said he lied about his job. She showed me a screenshot of his LinkedIn profile next to their chat. She had cross-referenced everything. She said she always verifies. Verifies. My mind started racing through everything I'd told her over the past week. She clicked into my folder. There were already screenshots. Our first message. A selfie from my profile. A screenshot of my job title from social media. I didn't even remember telling her my last name. I asked how she got that. She said it's not hard if you know what to look for. My stomach dropped. She had also saved a picture of my apartment building from Google Street View. I stared at it. She said she likes to know the environment. Environment. I asked why she needs all this. She said because men disappear. Disappear. She said when someone ghosts her, she updates the outcome and archives the folder. Archives. She scrolled to one labeled Daniel. Outcome. Corrected behavior. Corrected behavior. I asked what that meant. She said he stopped replying after the third date. So she sent him screenshots of everything he had said about valuing honesty. She said she reminded him of his own words. He apologized. She marked it corrected behavior. My chest felt tight listening to her. She scrolled to another one. Outcome. Escalated. I didn't ask what that meant. She didn't explain. She looked at me again and said she doesn't like unfinished stories. Unfinished stories. I realized she wasn't showing this to scare me. She thought it was impressive. She said she believes in accountability. Accountability. I asked what would determine my outcome. She leaned back slightly and studied me. She said that depends on your consistency. Consistency. I felt like I was being evaluated in real time. I asked what happens if someone tries to block her. She said screenshots exist for a reason. She tapped her phone lightly. I imagined my face sitting in that folder forever. Labeled. Categorized. Outcome pending. I asked how many folders she has. She said this year are total. Total. She didn't answer directly. She just smiled slightly. The rest of the date felt unreal. Every word I said felt like it was being stored somewhere. I became hyper-aware of my tone, my body language, the way I held my glass. She eventually closed the folder and slipped her phone back into her purse. She said she got a good feeling about me. Good feeling. But then she added that she's rarely wrong about outcomes. Rarely wrong. When the check came, $42 total, I paid just to end it faster. We walked outside into the cool night air. She hugged me briefly and said she'll update the folder tomorrow. Update the folder. I drove home feeling like I had just sat through an interview for something I didn't apply for. That night, I opened the dating app to unmatch her. Our chat was still there. I hovered over the unmatch button. Then my phone buzzed. A message from her. I usually wait 24 hours before logging outcomes. I froze. Another message. I hope you don't make this complicated. My heart started pounding. I didn't reply. A third message came through. Remember, I already have the screenshots. I stared at the screen, my throat dry. I didn't unmatch her that night. I didn't reply either. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about that folder. My name sitting there. Date stamped. Outcome blank. I didn't think a simple question about sleep could make my skin crawl, but the way he asked it, and the way he nodded after I answered, made it feel like I had just handed over something important. Not a preference. Not a fun fact. Something useful. We matched on a random Wednesday night when I couldn't sleep. Ironic, considering how this ended up. His name was Caleb. His profile looked harmless. Clean haircut, soft smile, one picture at a library, one at a hiking trail. His bio said he values routine and structure. I didn't think much of that. Some people just like being organized. We talked for a few days. He was polite, almost overly polite. Always responded at consistent times. 8:05 a.m. good morning text. 12:30 p.m. how's your day going? 9 o'clock p.m. hope you're relaxing. It felt steady, predictable, kind of comforting. After about a week, he suggested meeting at a quiet diner that's open late. Not fancy, just booths, bright lights, and coffee refills every 10 minutes. I agreed because it felt low pressure. I got there first and ordered a soda for $3 while I waited. It was around 9:45 p.m. when he walked in. First impression, he looked exactly like his photos. Neat, calm, composed. He slid into the booth across from me and gave a small smile. We started talking, and it felt easy. He asked about my job, my friends, my hobbies. Nothing weird. About 20 minutes in, he asked what time I usually go to sleep. It felt like a random question, but not alarming. I laughed and said it depends, usually around 11:30 or midnight on weekdays. He nodded slowly. Not casual nod. A thoughtful one, like he was adjusting something in his head. Then he asked what time I wake up. I said around 7. He nodded again. He asked if I ever stay up later on weekends. I said sometimes if I'm out with friends. He tilted his head slightly and asked how often that happens. That's when I started to feel a tiny bit uneasy. I said maybe once or twice a month. He nodded again. Every answer I gave felt like it was being filed away. I tried to lighten the mood and asked why he was so interested in my sleep schedule. He said sleep patterns reveal stability. Stability. I laughed awkwardly and said I guess. He didn't laugh. He asked if my bedroom faces the street or the back of the building. My chest tightened slightly. I said the back. He nodded again. That same thoughtful nod, like he was confirming something. The rest of the date felt mostly normal after that. We talked about movies, about travel. He seemed engaged. But every now and then, he'd glance at his watch. Not his phone. His watch. Like he was tracking time. We left the diner around 11:20 p.m. As we stood outside, he looked at the sky and then at me. He said I should get home soon. I said, yeah, probably. He gave me a quick hug and said goodnight. I drove home feeling slightly unsettled, but not fully alarmed. When I got to my apartment, it was 11:32 p.m. I remember that time clearly now. I went inside, changed into pajamas, brushed my teeth. At 11:41 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from him. Right on schedule. Home safe. I replied yes. Then he said good. Lights out in about 20 minutes. My stomach tightened. I stared at the message. I typed back that I don't have a strict bedtime. He responded with a smiley face and said routine is important. Routine. I didn't reply after that. At 11:58 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Almost midnight. I didn't open it. I locked my phone and tried to sleep. Around 12:15 a.m., I thought I heard something outside my window. I live on the second floor. My bedroom faces the back parking lot. I told myself it was probably a car door slamming or someone walking by. I pulled the blanket up and tried to ignore it. The next morning at exactly 7:02 a.m., my phone buzzed. Good morning. Up right on time. My heart skipped. I hadn't set an alarm that morning. I had woken up naturally at 6:58 and checked my phone at 7 o'clock. How did he know? I told myself it was coincidence. I had told him I wake up around 7. That day at work, I kept thinking about his nod. Like he was adjusting a schedule. That night, I tried staying up later on purpose. I watched videos until 12:30 a.m. At 12:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Running late tonight. My chest tightened. I hadn't told him I was still awake. I didn't reply. I turned off my lights at 12:35. A few minutes later, I heard something faint outside again, like a soft crunch of gravel. I forced myself not to look out the window. The next morning, another 7:02 a.m. text. Consistency is attractive. I felt sick reading it. Over the next few days, it continued. If I turned my lights off around 11:40, I'd get a text at 11:45. If I stayed up later, he'd mention it subtly the next morning. Rough night. Couldn't sleep. I'd never told him that. I started closing my blinds earlier, double-checking my window lock. I told my friend about it, and she said maybe he's just guessing. But it didn't feel like guessing. One Friday night, I decided to test it. I turned off all the lights at 10:30 p.m. Then I sat in my living room in the dark waiting. At 10:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. Early night. My throat went dry. I hadn't gone to bed. I hadn't even gone into my bedroom. I walked quietly to the back window and peeked through the tiniest gap in the curtain. Across the parking lot, near the fence, I saw a shape. Standing still. Too still. My heart started pounding so loud I thought it might give me away. My phone buzzed again. I prefer predictability. I dropped to the floor and instantly. I didn't reply. I didn't move for what felt like forever. After a few minutes, headlights flashed briefly in the lot. A car started. Drove off slowly. The next day, I blocked his number. Deleted the app. I changed my routine completely. Started sleeping at different times. Staying over at a friend's place randomly. For a week, nothing happened. Then one night at exactly 11:32 p.m., my phone buzzed from an unknown number. Lights out. I didn't open the message. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the way he nodded in that diner booth. Like he was adjusting something. Like he was building a schedule around me. The first message she sent me wasn't hello. It wasn't how's your day. It was this weird half joke that didn't feel like a joke at all. She asked if I was going to pretend this was the first time. I thought she meant like first date nerves or something. I laughed at my phone. I had no idea that would be the moment everything started feeling wrong. We matched on a Thursday night. Her name was Leela. Her profile looked normal. Simple selfies, one picture at the beach, one with a coffee mug. Nothing dramatic. Her bio said we meet when we're meant to. I figured it was just one of those vague lines people put to sound deep. She messaged first. She said this feels familiar. I replied that dating apps always feel repetitive. She sent a smiley face and said not like that. I didn't think much of it. We started talking and it felt smooth. Easy. She referenced little details from my profile like my favorite movie and the fact that I hate mushrooms. Nothing strange there. But every now and then she'd say something like you said that last time. I asked what she meant. She just responded with never mind. After 2 days of messaging, she suggested meeting at this quiet park near downtown. It's got a small pond, a walking path, and benches scattered around. Pretty low-key, public, safe. I got there a few minutes early and sat on a bench near the water. It was late afternoon, not many people around. When she walked up, my stomach flipped slightly. Not because she was scary, because she looked at me like she already knew me. Not like first date eye contact, more like second or third. She smiled in a way that felt familiar to her, not to me. We sat down and started talking. At first, it was normal. She asked about my week. I asked about hers. Then she tilted her head and said she couldn't believe I agreed to meet her again. Again. I laughed and said we just matched a few days ago. She looked confused. She said we matched months ago. My chest tightened slightly. I told her I would remember that. She said I didn't remember last time either. Last time. She started describing a conversation I didn't recognize. She said we talked about a bookstore downtown, about how I used to live near the river, about how I hate pineapple on pizza. I do hate pineapple on pizza, but that's in my bio. I told her maybe she's confusing me with someone else. She shook her head slowly. She said no, it was you. She said we met at a coffee shop. I felt my stomach drop. I've met a lot of people for coffee, but none named Leela. She described the coffee shop in detail, the wooden tables, the chalkboard menu, the fact that I ordered an iced latte for $5 even though it was cold outside. I felt my mind scrambling. I do sometimes order iced drinks when it's cold, but I didn't remember meeting her. I told her I honestly don't recall that. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she asked why I didn't remember what happened. What happened? My heart started beating faster. I asked what she meant. She said after the coffee date, we went for a walk. She said I got quiet halfway through. She said I kept checking my phone. She said I seemed distracted. None of it sounded impossible, but none of it clicked either. I told her I think she's mistaken. She looked genuinely confused. She said this is exactly what happened last time. My throat went dry. I asked what she meant by that. She said last time, when she brought up the coffee date, I said I didn't remember. I stared at her. She leaned back slightly and crossed her arms. She said she even showed me screenshots before. Screenshots? I asked what screenshots. She pulled out her phone. She opened her camera roll. She scrolled. There was a photo of me, sitting at a coffee shop table, wearing a gray hoodie I own, holding a plastic cup with a green straw. My heart slammed into my ribs. I grabbed my phone and checked the date on the picture she showed me. It was from 3 months ago. 3 months ago, I was definitely going on dates. But I had no memory of this. She scrolled to another picture. Us walking near the river. My face slightly turned away from the camera. I felt dizzy. I tried to remember that hoodie, that exact day. Anything. Nothing. I asked where she got those. She said she took them. Obviously. I felt exposed seeing myself from an angle I didn't remember. She said after that date, I stopped replying. She said she thought maybe I ghosted her. But then she saw my profile pop up again a week later. We matched again. She said she asked me about the first date, and I said I didn't remember. Again. She said it felt like I was pretending. Pretending. I felt like I was losing track of something important. I asked if she still had our old messages. She said they disappeared. Disappeared. She said that's why she screenshotted them. She opened another folder and showed me screenshots of chats. The username matched mine. The photos matched mine. The messages sounded like me. Same tone, same phrases. There was even a part where I joked about pineapple on pizza exactly the way I usually do. I felt sick reading it. I asked why I would forget something like that. She stared at me carefully. She said that's what she's trying to figure out. Trying to figure out. She said she doesn't think I'm lying. She said she thinks something happens. Happens. I asked what that means. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. She said both times, toward the end of the date, I seemed confused. Like I didn't recognize her. Like something had reset. Reset. I felt a cold wave run through me. She said last time, after we walked by the river, I stopped mid-sentence and asked her how long we'd been talking. I felt my stomach twist. That's something I would say as a joke sometimes. But she wasn't joking. She said she told me we'd been talking for over an hour. And I said that couldn't be right. I tried to remember that. Nothing. She asked me now how long we'd been sitting in the park. I checked my phone. 47 minutes. That felt right. She nodded slowly. Then she asked if anything feels off right now. I didn't want to say yes, but something did. Like there was a blank space in my head where a memory should be. She asked if I remember matching her the first time. I said no. She asked if I remember deleting the app 3 months ago. I froze. I did delete the app for a while, but I don't remember why. I told her I took a break. She said that's what I said last time, too. Last time. I suddenly felt hyper-aware of everything around me. The pond, the trees, the quiet path. I asked why she matched me again as she thought something was wrong. She said because she wanted to see if it would happen again. Happen again. My heart was pounding. She said she needed to know if it was coincidence. Coincidence. I stood up slowly. She stayed seated. She said don't walk away this time. This time. I felt lightheaded. I told her I need to think. She nodded like she expected that. I walked away from the park without looking back. That night, I went through my phone. I scrolled through my photos from 3 months ago. There was a gap. A full day with no pictures. No messages saved. Nothing. Just empty. I checked my bank statements. There was $5 charged from a coffee shop I rarely go to. Dated the same day as her photo. My chest tightened. I don't know if I met her before. I don't know if I forgot. All I know is when I reopened the dating app later that week, her profile was gone. But sometimes when I scroll late at night, I see a face that looks almost like hers. And I wonder if I'm about to forget again. I didn't realize how much I relied on chat history until he erased ours right in front of me. It wasn't dramatic. No raised voice. No argument. Just a quiet tap on his screen, and suddenly the whole thing was gone. And then he leaned closer like we had just stepped into a different version of reality. We matched on a Tuesday night. His name was Aaron. Profile looked normal. Not overly curated. A couple of travel photos, one with a dog, one blurry group picture at a birthday dinner. His bio said he values privacy in a loud world. That sounded kind of poetic. Maybe slightly dramatic, but not alarming. We talked for about a week before meeting. He wasn't clingy, not distant either, just steady. He responded within an hour most of the time. He asked thoughtful questions. Nothing too deep, nothing too shallow. He suggested we meet at a small art gallery opening downtown. Free entry, cheap wine, and enough people around to make it feel safe. I liked that it wasn't the usual dinner setup. I got there a few minutes late because parking was a mess. He was already inside, standing near a wall covered in abstract paintings that looked like someone had spilled paint and called it meaning. First impression, he looked exactly like his photos. Calm expression, observant eyes. He smiled when he saw me and gave a quick side hug. We grabbed plastic cups of wine, probably $7 each if it wasn't free that night, and started walking around the gallery. Conversation felt normal at first. We talked about the art, about work, about random travel stories. About 30 minutes in, we stepped away from the crowd into a quieter corner of the room. There was a bench near one of the larger pieces, kind of dim lighting there. He pulled out his phone casually. I assumed he was checking the time. Instead, he opened the dating app. I laughed lightly and asked if he was making sure I was still there. He smiled slightly but didn't respond. He tapped a few things on the screen. I felt my phone buzz in my hand. I glanced down. You are no longer matched. My stomach dropped instantly. I looked up at him. He locked his phone and slid it back into his pocket. Then he leaned in slightly and said, "Now this isn't documented." My chest tightened so fast I felt dizzy. I asked what he meant. He glanced around at the people nearby, then back at me. He said apps log everything. Timestamps, read receipts, edits, unmatches. He said once you unmatch, there's no record. No record. I forced a laugh and said record of what? He held my gaze longer than normal. He said record of what we say next. What we say next. I suddenly became very aware of how quiet that corner was. The rest of the gallery noise felt distant. I asked why he would do that mid-conversation. He said he doesn't like leaving trails. Trails. I said trails of what? He shrugged slightly and said misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I opened the app again on my phone. Our entire chat was gone. No messages, no profile. Like he never existed there. I looked back at him and said, "That's weird." He nodded slowly. He said, "It's safer." Safer. I asked, safer for who? He didn't answer that directly. Instead, he asked if I ever screenshot conversations. I said sometimes if something is funny. He studied my face carefully. Then he said that's why you have to know when to cut the thread. Cut the thread. I felt like I was standing in a different situation than I thought I was. I tried to bring the conversation back to normal, asked about the art again, joked about one of the paintings. He responded, but his tone had shifted. Quieter, more focused. He asked if I trust apps. I said not really, but I use them anyway. He nodded. He said people forget how much data is stored. Stored. I said okay, but why unmatch right now? He leaned slightly closer. Close enough that I could smell the wine on his breath. He said because now what we talk about stays between us. Between us. My stomach felt tight. I suddenly wanted to be back in the crowd. I stood up and said I needed some air. He didn't stop me, just watched as I walked toward the entrance. Outside, the night air felt cold and loud compared to the quiet corner inside. I pulled out my phone and tried searching his name on social media. Nothing came up. No mutuals, no tagged photos. I went back into the gallery after a minute because I didn't want to look dramatic. He was still by that bench. He smiled slightly when I returned, like he knew I had checked. He asked if everything was okay. I nodded. We walked around a bit more, but the vibe had shifted permanently. Every question he asked now felt heavier. He asked what I'd do when someone misrepresents me. I said I correct them. He asked how I'd prove it without written evidence. Without written evidence. My throat went dry. I said I don't know. He said exactly. Exactly. I felt like I had stepped into a conversation with rules I didn't agree to. After another 10 minutes, I said I needed to head out because I had an early morning. He didn't argue. He walked me to the entrance. As we stood outside, he said it's interesting how much people rely on documentation to feel safe. I didn't respond. He asked if I felt less safe now. I swallowed and said I just felt confused. He nodded slightly. Then he said confusion is harder to screenshot. Harder to screenshot. My chest felt tight. I told him good night and walked quickly toward my car. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. Now this isn't documented. I reopened the app just in case it glitched. His profile was gone completely. The next day, I got a text from an unknown number. It said conversations are more honest off the record. My heart slammed into my ribs. I hadn't given him my number through the app. We'd only talked there. I didn't reply. Another text came. You seemed tense after I cut the thread. Cut the thread. I blocked the number instantly. 2 days later, I got an email. No subject line. Just a single sentence. You can't prove what wasn't saved. I felt sick staring at it. I checked the sender address. Random letters and numbers. I closed my laptop and just sat there in silence. I don't know what he wanted. I don't know what he planned to say that he didn't get to. I just know that every time I match with someone now, I screenshot everything. And part of me still hears his voice in that quiet corner of the gallery. Now this isn't documented. I should have felt flattered when she said I qualified. Instead, I felt like I had just passed a test I didn't know I was taking. The way she smiled when she said it wasn't warm. It was satisfied. Like she'd been waiting for the app to hand her someone exactly like me or close enough. We matched on a Friday night. I remember because I was out with friends and half paying attention while scrolling. Her name was Danielle. Her profile looked different from most. Very minimal. No group shots. No silly filters. Just 3 clear photos and a short bio that said curated connections only. I assumed she meant she was picky. We started messaging the next day. She didn't waste time with small talk. She asked direct questions. How tall are you really? Do you live alone? What do you do after work most nights? It felt a bit like a survey, but I figured she just knew what she wanted. After about 4 days, she suggested meeting at a rooftop restaurant downtown. One of those places with glass railings and city views. Kind of expensive. I checked the menu beforehand and saw entrees around $28. I almost suggested somewhere cheaper, but I didn't want to look cheap. I got there early and stood near the edge looking at the skyline. It was just getting dark, city lights starting to flicker on. She walked up behind me and said my name like she was confirming it. I turned around. First impression, she looked even more put together than her photos. Sleek hair, fitted black dress, steady eye contact. She didn't smile right away. She studied me for a second. Then she smiled. Just a little. We sat down and ordered drinks. She asked for something specific. I ordered whatever the waiter recommended, which ended up being $16. The conversation at first felt normal. We talked about work. She works in tech. Something about data modeling and behavioral analysis. She explained it in a way that sounded impressive but vague. About 20 minutes in, she leaned back slightly and said she doesn't use the app the way most people do. I asked what she meant. She said she set very specific filters. Very specific. She said the app only connects her with men who meet certain criteria. Criteria. I laughed lightly and said, like what? She looked at me carefully and said location radius under 5 miles. Income range above a certain threshold. No previous marriages. No kids. Consistent activity patterns. Verified employment. My chest tightened slightly. She listed them like bullet points. She said she also tracks response timing and message structure. Message structure. I joked that I must have written something right. That's when she smiled again and said I barely qualified. Barely qualified. The way she said it wasn't playful. It was measured. I asked what I almost failed. She tilted her head and said your response time variance was slightly inconsistent the first 2 days. My stomach flipped. I remembered those days I was busy at work. She said she almost unmatched me. Almost unmatched me. I felt a weird mix of annoyance and unease. I asked why she even bothered if I was borderline. She said sometimes borderline cases are interesting. Interesting. She took a sip of her drink and kept talking. She said the app's algorithm feeds her men who fit within her set parameters. She tweaks them weekly. Tweaks them. She said it's like adjusting a net. Net. I laughed and said that sounds intense. She shrugged and said it's efficient. Efficient. Our food came. Mine was $29. I barely noticed what it tasted like. She kept asking questions that felt oddly precise. What time do you usually get home from work? How often do you order takeout? Do you park in a garage or on the street? I answered casually, but my mind was racing. I asked why that matters. She said routines reveal risk. Risk. I asked risk of what? She smiled faintly and said unpredictability. Unpredictability. I started to feel like I wasn't on a date. I was being evaluated for something. She asked if I ever changed my schedule randomly. I said sometimes. She frowned slightly. Then she asked if I've ever moved without telling someone. That question hit differently. I said, what do you mean? She said some men relocate when things get complicated. Relocate. My heart started pounding. I asked, complicated how? She said when they realize they've been selected for a purpose. Selected. I felt a chill run through me. I tried to joke again and said selected for what? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she asked if I believe algorithms can predict behavior. I said maybe to an extent. She nodded slowly. Then she said the app is just a tool. Tool. She said the real filtering happens after. After. I asked what that means. She leaned forward slightly and lowered her voice. She said once someone qualifies, she verifies them in person. Verifies. I asked how. She glanced at her phone. Then she said background checks are easier than people think. My throat went dry. I asked if she ran one on me. She held my gaze and said only the basics. Basics. She listed my college, my current job, the street I live on. My chest tightened hard. I never told her my exact street. She said it's public information if you know how to look. Know how to look. I suddenly felt exposed sitting there under the city lights. She said she doesn't waste time on men who don't meet her threshold. Threshold. I asked what happens to the ones who barely qualify. She smiled again. She said they either adapt or they're removed from the pool. Removed from the pool. I felt I was sitting across from someone who wasn't talking about dating at all. She asked if I felt lucky. Lucky. I said I'm not sure. She laughed softly and said you should. Should. The check came. $86 total. I paid without thinking. As we stood up to leave, she said she'll update her filters tonight. Update her filters. I asked to update them how. She said based on tonight's data. Data. We walked to the elevator. She stood close enough that I could feel the warmth from her arm. She said you're still within range. Within range. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. I hesitated for a second before following. She looked at me in the mirrored wall. Then she said, don't drop below the threshold. My heart was pounding so loud I thought she could hear it. We reached the ground floor. She walked out and didn't look back. That night, I opened the app. Her profile was gone. No unmatched notification. Just gone. 2 days later, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line said criteria updated. I didn't open it. I just stared at the preview line that said you were still eligible. I don't use that app anymore. But sometimes when I scroll through other ones, I wonder if I'm inside someone else's filter right now. Barely qualified. I thought I was imagining it the first time. I actually blinked and refreshed the screen because I assumed I must have misheard something. But I didn't. His bio changed right in front of me while he was sitting across the table, smiling like nothing was happening. We matched on a Monday night. His name was Nate. His profile was pretty average. Decent pictures, one with a golden retriever, one at a baseball game. His bio was short. It said coffee over cocktails and sarcasm is a love language. Simple. We talked for about 5 days. He was funny. Not over the top, just easy to talk to. He replied fast, but not too fast. He seemed relaxed. We decided to meet at this small Thai restaurant near where I live. It's one of those cozy places with low lighting and tiny tables squeezed together. Nothing fancy. Entrees around $18. I got there first and sat at a 2-person table near the window. He walked in right on time. First impression, he looked like his photos. Maybe slightly more confident in person. We ordered drinks and started talking. The first half hour felt normal. We joked about work. I told him about this embarrassing moment at my office where I accidentally called my boss mom during a meeting. He laughed hard at that. At one point, he asked what's something random that always makes you laugh. I told him that my friends and I have this dumb inside joke about raccoons being tiny landlords, like they're just out there collecting rent from trash cans. I don't even know how it started. It's stupid, but it makes me laugh every time. He laughed and said that's oddly specific. We kept talking. I went to the restroom about 40 minutes in, just to fix my hair and breathe for a second. While I was in there, I opened the app out of habit. Not to stalk him, just scrolling. His profile popped up at the top of my matches. I clicked on it. His bio now said coffee over cocktails, sarcasm is a love language, and firm believer that raccoons are tiny landlords. My stomach dropped instantly. I stared at the screen. Maybe I had misread it before. I tried to remember exactly what his bio said earlier. I was almost certain raccoons were not mentioned. I refreshed the app. Same bio. My chest felt tight. I told myself maybe he had that line already and I just didn't notice. But that joke was so specific. So private. I went back to the table trying to act normal. He was sitting there scrolling on his phone casually. I sat down and asked what he was looking at. He smiled and said, just checking something. Checking something. We kept talking. I decided to test it. I told him another small dumb story about how I once named my car Greg because it looked like a Greg. Nothing deep, just random. He laughed and said Greg is a strong name for a car. I smiled, but inside I felt tense. About 10 minutes later, he picked up his phone again and started typing. I pretended not to notice. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed with a random notification. I picked it up slowly and opened the app again. His bio now said coffee over cocktails, sarcasm is a love language, raccoons are tiny landlords, and my car is named Greg. My heart slammed into my ribs. I felt like the air got thinner. I looked up at him. He was watching me, not smiling fully, just observing. I asked casually if he updated his bio a lot. He tilted his head slightly and said sometimes. Sometimes. I asked if he just added something. He shrugged and said maybe. Maybe. I said I thought I saw something new. He leaned back and said bios evolve. Evolve. My hands felt cold. I tried to laugh it off and said that's quick evolution. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he asked if I believe in real-time adaptation. Real-time adaptation. I said in what sense? He said some people mirror energy to build connection. Mirror energy. My stomach twisted. I opened the app again under the table. Another change. This time, under his prompts, he had added hates calling boss mom and suspicious of raccoon landlords. I felt exposed in a way I can't fully explain. Those were things I had just said. Private jokes. Private embarrassment. I suddenly wondered how many other girls he was on dates with at the same time. Was he updating his bio mid-dinner to attract someone else? Was he using my stories as bait? I asked him directly if he was changing his profile right now. He looked at me calmly and said it's public space. Public space. I said those are things I told you privately. He smiled slightly and said nothing on a dating app is private. My chest tightened. I asked why he would add them. He said they test well. Test well. My stomach dropped. I asked test with who? He tapped his phone lightly. He said with the audience. Audience. I felt I was sitting inside something bigger than just a date. I opened the app again. His bio updated once more. Currently enjoying pad thai and wondering who else likes raccoons. We were literally eating pad thai. My face went hot. I looked around the restaurant. No one seemed to be paying attention. But suddenly I felt like everyone could be. I asked if he does this on every date. He said not every. Not every. I asked what makes this one different. He studied my face for a second. Then he said you're giving good material. Good material. I felt sick. I pushed my plate away. I asked if he was trying to impress someone else. He said I'm optimizing. Optimizing. He said bios that reflect current emotion perform better. Perform better. I realized then that I wasn't the only audience. I was content. Content for his profile. I opened the app again and noticed something else. His distance had changed. It now showed him as less than 1 mile away. We were less than 1 mile apart. But it also meant he was actively using the app. Right now. I looked up at him and asked if he was matching with people while sitting with me. He didn't deny it. He just said visibility matters. Visibility matters. My heart was pounding. I asked if the raccoon joke was meant for someone specific. He smiled slightly and said whoever swipes next. Whoever swipes next. I felt like something inside me snapped. I stood up. He looked surprised for the first time. I grabbed my bag and said I'm leaving. He didn't try to stop me. He just watched. As I walked toward the door, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. New match. It was his profile, but with a different main photo. And the bio now said sometimes the best stories are live. Live. I felt sick. I unmatched him instantly. But later that night, when I reopened the app out of morbid curiosity, his profile was still there. Different jokes. Different lines. None of mine. Like I had just been a draft. Sometimes I still think about those inside jokes. About how fast they return into marketing. And I wonder how many other girls are sitting at dinner right now, laughing at something that's already being posted somewhere else. I've had awkward dates before. Boring ones. Ones where you check the time every 5 minutes. But I've never had one where I felt like I accidentally unlocked something just by answering a question. It wasn't even a dramatic question. It was simple. What scares you most? And I answered without thinking. We matched on a Sunday night when I was lying in bed half asleep. Her name was Alina. Her profile was minimal but intense. No smiling pictures. Just steady eye contact in every shot. Her bio said curiosity reveals everything. I didn't think much of it. We started talking and she was different from most girls I'd matched with. Less small talk. More direct. She asked things like, what's your earliest memory? What do you avoid thinking about? What would you change about your childhood if you could? It felt deep but not uncomfortable at first. After about 5 days of messaging, she suggested meeting at this quiet late-night coffee shop near the edge of town. Not the busy one downtown. This one was tucked behind a row of office buildings. Open until 1 a.m. Kind of dim. Lots of people on laptops. I got there around 9:30 p.m. It was quiet, just a few tables occupied. She was already sitting near the back wall. First impression, she looked exactly like her photos. Long dark hair, calm face, almost unreadable expression. We ordered drinks. Mine was $6. Hers was something complicated with almond milk. We sat down across from each other and started talking. At first, it was normal. She asked about my job and my friends. I asked about hers. She works in behavioral research. Something about studying predictive models. Predictive models. About 30 minutes in, she leaned forward slightly and asked what scares you most. It felt like one of those deep icebreaker questions. I laughed and said probably losing control. She didn't smile. She asked what kind of control. I said like not remembering something important or feeling like my own brain is working against me. I don't even know why I said that. It just came out. She nodded slowly. Then she pulled out her phone. She opened the dating app. Our chat. Right there in front of me. She started typing. I watched her thumbs move. I asked what she was doing. She didn't look up. She typed exactly what I had just said. Losing control. Not remembering something important. Brain working against me. Then she sent it. To me. I felt my phone buzz on the table. I stared at her. She looked up and said, let's see if it matches. Matches what? My chest tightened. I picked up my phone and opened the chat. There it was. My fear written out. I asked what she meant. She said the app predicts compatibility based on behavioral inputs. Behavioral inputs. I said, yeah, that's how most apps work. She shook her head slightly. She said not just interests. She said emotional triggers. Triggers. I laughed awkwardly and said I doubt it works like that. She just watched my face carefully. Then she refreshed the app. I felt my stomach twist. She said sometimes if you introduce a new variable, the system adjusts. Adjusts. I'd opened the app on my own phone. Nothing looked different. Our chat was still there. Her profile still the same. I told her I think it's just marketing. She shrugged. She said maybe. Then she asked me to refresh my feed. I hesitated but did it. The profile started loading. I scrolled. First one. A girl whose bio said terrified of forgetting who I am. My heart skipped. Maybe coincidence. Second profile. Fear of losing control is real. My chest tightened. I looked up at Alina. She was watching me. Calm. I kept scrolling. Third profile. Looking for someone who understands memory gaps. My hands started to feel cold. I told myself it was coincidence. Apps show similar themes sometimes. She asked, what are you seeing? I told her. She nodded slowly. She said the model is responsive. Responsive. I said responsive to what? She tapped her phone lightly. She said to you. To me. I felt exposed in a way I can't explain. Like something private had just been fed into a system. I said that's not how algorithms work. She smiled slightly. She said they work better than people think. I refreshed again. Another profile. Bio said, what if your memories aren't yours? My throat went dry. I looked around the coffee shop. Everything felt normal. People typing, barista wiping counters. But suddenly I felt like I was in a controlled environment. I asked her if she works for the app. She didn't answer directly. She said I study patterns. Patterns. I said, did you plan this? She tilted her head slightly. She said, I just introduced your fear. Introduced. I felt like I needed air. I stood up and said, I'm going to the restroom. She nodded calmly. In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. I tried to calm down. It was probably coincidence. Apps recycle phrases. When I went back to the table, she was still there scrolling. She looked up and asked, if you don't remember this conversation tomorrow, how would you prove it happened? My heart slammed into my ribs. I said, what? She said, you just told me your biggest fear is not remembering something important. I said, yeah. She nodded. Then she said, what if that's already happened? My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I asked what she meant. She leaned back and said, we've matched before. My stomach dropped. She said, last time, he told me the same thing. About losing control. About memory. I felt dizzy. I said, no, we haven't. She shrugged slightly. She said that's what we said last time, too. Last time. I felt like the room was tilting. I grabbed my phone and checked our chat history. It only showed messages from this week. She said the app resets sometimes. Resets. I felt sick. I asked if she had proof. She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. It was our chat, dated 2 months ago. My profile picture. My username. A message from me saying I'm scared of not remembering something important. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I tried to remember. Nothing. She said last time, when she typed it into the chat, your feet changed too. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I asked why she's doing this. She said she's testing the model. Testing. I asked what happens if it matches. She smiled faintly. She said it already did. My phone buzzed. I looked down. Notification from the app. New match. The name was unfamiliar. The bio said afraid of forgetting what we did last time. My hands were shaking. I looked back up at Alina. Her seat was empty. Completely empty. Her cup still there. Half full. I scanned the coffee shop. She was gone. No door sound. No goodbye. I grabbed my phone and opened the chat. Our conversation was still there. But the message she typed about my fear was gone. Like it was never sent. I sat there for a long time staring at the screen. Later that night, I tried to remember her face clearly. I could picture her eyes. But her smile felt blurry. Sometimes I open the app late at night and scroll. Every now and then I see a profile that mentions fear of memory. And I wonder if I already met her and just don't remember. I knew the night had shifted when he corrected me about my own shortcut. Not in a confused way. Not in a helpful way. In a certain way. Like I was the one who forgot how to get to my own apartment. We matched on a random Thursday. His name was Marcus. Profile looked normal. A couple of hiking pictures, one at a food truck festival, one blurry gym selfie. His bio said protective energy only. I thought it was just one of those confident phrases guys use to sound strong. We talked for about a week. He was attentive. Always asking if I got home safe after work. Asking what neighborhood I live in, but in a casual way. I told him just the general area, nothing specific. He suggested we meet at this cozy bar near my side of town. It's small, dim lights, old wooden tables, drinks around $14. I agreed because it was close to my place and felt familiar. I got there first and grabbed a seat at the bar. He walked in a few minutes later. First impression, he looked exactly like his photos. Tall, solid build, calm expression. The first hour felt normal. We talked about work, about music, about random childhood stuff. He seemed genuinely interested. At one point, he asked how I usually get home from here. I laughed and said it's a 10-minute walk. He frowned slightly and asked if I walk alone at night often. I said, yeah, it's a safe area. He nodded slowly, but did look convinced. When we finished our drinks, I said I was heading out. He immediately stood up and said he'd walk me home. I said that's not necessary. It's really close. He insisted. Said he wouldn't feel right letting me go alone. I didn't want to argue, so I agreed. We stepped out into the cool night air. The streets were quiet, but not empty. A few cars passing, some people a block away. We started walking. I usually take the side street because it's faster and better lit. About halfway down the block, I turned left onto the side street. He stopped walking. I looked back at him. He said that's not the way. My stomach tightened slightly. I said, yeah, it is. He shook his head slowly and said you go straight for another block, then turn right. My chest felt tight. I said, no, I always turn here. He looked at the street like he was calculating something. Then he said, maybe you changed it. Changed it. I felt confused. I said this is the way I always go. He stared at me for a second too long. Then he followed. But he looked tense. As we walked down the side street, he kept glancing around like he was checking landmarks. I asked if everything was okay. He said, yeah, just making sure. Making sure of what? I felt my heart beating faster. We reached the next intersection. I turned right again, heading toward my building. He slowed down. Then he said, "You usually go the other way here." My stomach dropped. I stopped walking. I asked what he meant by usually. He looked at me carefully and said, "From what I've seen." From what I've seen. The words felt heavy. I said, "What have you seen?" He hesitated. Then he said nothing weird, just that he's noticed patterns. Patterns. I felt like the air got colder. I asked how he would know my walking pattern. He shrugged slightly. Said I mentioned the bar was close. Said he guessed. Guessed. But the way he said it didn't feel like guessing. We kept walking. I felt hyper-aware of every step. When we reached my block, I slowed down. My building was halfway down. I considered telling him I'd live in the building before mine just to see what he'd do. So I did. I stopped in front of the wrong building and said, "This is me." He looked at it, then at me, then back at the building. He said, "No, it's not." My heart slammed into my ribs. I forced a laugh and said, "What?" He said, "Your entrance has a blue awning. This one is red." My throat went dry. I had never mentioned the awning. I rarely even think about it. I said, "Maybe you're mistaken." He shook his head slowly. Then he pointed down the block and said, "It's that one. My building. With the blue awning." I felt frozen. I asked how he knows that. He looked at me calmly and said, "You walk home at 10:40 most weeknights." My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I said, "What?" He continued like he was explaining something obvious. Said, "You leave the bar at around 10:35, cut through the side street, turn right, then slow down near the lamppost before your building." Lamppost. I always slow down there because the sidewalk is uneven. I never told him that. I'd never told anyone that. I felt sick. I said, "Have you been following me?" He looked almost offended. He said, "Following is a strong word." Strong word. I took a step back. He stepped forward slightly. Not aggressively, just closing distance. He said he likes to understand someone's routine before investing. Investing. My mind was racing. I said, "We've only known each other a week." He nodded. Then said, "That's enough time to observe." Observe. I looked down the block. My building was right there. Lights out in some windows. Normal. Everything normal. Except this. I said, "I'm good from here." He didn't move. He said, "You missed a turn earlier." Missed a turn. Like it bothered him. I said I didn't. He said, "You usually hesitate at that first corner." I felt dizzy. I asked how he knows that. He said, "Because sometimes you check your phone before turning." My hands felt cold. I'd do that. Sometimes. I felt I was standing in front of someone who knew my routine better than I did. I said, "I'm going inside." He watched me carefully. I walked toward my building. I didn't look back until I reached the door. He was still standing there. Not waving. Just watching. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. As soon as it closed behind me, my phone buzzed. A message from him. "You forgot to slow down at the lamppost tonight." My chest felt tight. I didn't reply. I went upstairs and locked my apartment door. I stood in the dark for a long time. The next morning, I checked the app. His profile was gone. Not unmatched. Gone. That night at 10:40, I stood by my window and looked down at the street. Near the lamppost, someone was standing there. Still. Waiting. I didn't realize I was being evaluated until she thanked me for cooperating. That word stuck with me. Cooperating. Like I had agreed to something without knowing the terms. Like this whole night wasn't just a date, but some kind of process I had already been enrolled in. We matched on a Tuesday afternoon. Her name was Sabrina. Her profile was simple but oddly specific. It said currently testing long-term compatibility and nothing else. Her photos were normal enough. One in a bookstore, one in a park, one close-up selfie with no smile. We started talking, and she was polite, almost formal. Not flirty. Not cold, just steady. She asked about my schedule right away. What time I wake up. What days I work from home. What my weekends usually look like. I figured she just wanted to know if we'd align. After about a week, she suggested dinner at this small Mediterranean place about 15 minutes from where I live. It wasn't fancy, but not cheap either. Plates around $24. I got there first and grabbed the table near the back. She walked in right on time. First impression, she looked like her photos. Calm face. Neutral expression. Not nervous at all. We ordered and started talking. The first half hour was normal. She asked about my hobbies, my family, my past relationships. Nothing too invasive. Then she started asking questions that felt slightly off. How often do you check the app during the day? Do you ever swipe out of boredom? Have you ever felt like the app was trying to push someone specific on you? I laughed and said sometimes it does feel like that. She nodded slowly. She said it suggests replacements aggressively. Replacements. I asked what she meant. She said the app never wants users to settle. Never wants users to settle. She said, even when you start talking to someone consistently, it keeps introducing new profiles. I shrugged and said that's just how they keep engagement up. She looked at me carefully. Then she said she thinks the app tests loyalty. Tests loyalty. I laughed awkwardly and said that sounds dramatic. She didn't laugh. She said every time she gets close to someone, the app floods her feed with better options. Better options. She leaned forward slightly and asked if I'd noticed that too. I hesitated. I have noticed that. I said maybe. She nodded. Then she said that's why she needed to confirm something tonight. Confirm what? She pulled out her phone and placed it on the table between us. The dating app was open. Her feed was visible. I saw profile after profile of guys smiling at the camera. She said she hadn't swiped on anyone since matching with me. Since matching with me. I didn't know how to respond. She asked if I had. I said I still browse sometimes. She stared at me for a second. Then she nodded slowly. She said honesty is important. Important. She picked up her phone and opened our chat. Then she turned the screen toward me. She said, I need you to unmatch everyone else right now. My stomach dropped. I laughed nervously and said, what? She said, just for tonight. Just for tonight. She said she wants to see if the app stops suggesting replacements once there are none left. None left. I felt like this was turning into something else entirely. I said that seems unnecessary. She smiled faintly and said it's a small gesture. Small gesture. She asked to see my phone. I hesitated. She held out her hand calmly. I don't even know why I did it, but I unlocked my phone and opened the app. She watched as I scrolled through my matches. She said start unmatching. My chest felt tight. I had unmatched one. Then another. She watched my face the whole time. I felt exposed. Like I was proving something. After a few minutes, my match list was nearly empty. She nodded approvingly. Then she said good. Good. She refreshed her own feed. New profiles loaded. She frowned slightly. She said it's still suggesting replacements. Still suggesting replacements. She looked at me and said maybe it needs confirmation. Confirmation. She asked me to delete the app. My heart started pounding. I said that's a bit much. She tilted her head slightly and said if you're serious, it shouldn't matter. Serious. We had been on one date. One. I said I don't think I'm ready to delete anything. Her expression shifted. Not angry. Just disappointed. Then she smiled again. That same faint smile. She said thank you for cooperating. Cooperating. My stomach flipped. She said this should help. Help what? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she refreshed her feed again. This time, it glitched for a second. Then her screen went blank. No profiles. No suggestions. Just a loading symbol. She stared at it like she had been waiting for that. Then she looked up at me. She said I hope the app stops suggesting replacements now. Now. The way she said it felt final. I asked what she meant. She leaned back in her chair and said sometimes it takes a joint action. Joint action. I felt like something had shifted in the room. I opened my phone again. My app wouldn't load. Just a blank screen. I tried closing it. Reopening. Nothing. She watched me calmly. She said, see. See what? She said it works better when both parties commit. Commit. My heart was pounding so hard I felt lightheaded. I said, this is weird. She nodded slightly. Then she said, you won't need it anymore. Won't need what? She stood up slowly. The check hadn't even come yet. She said, thank you for cooperating again. Again. I felt frozen in my seat. She walked toward the exit without looking back. I sat there for a minute, trying to process what just happened. When the waiter came with the check, $52 total, I paid and left quickly. Outside, the night air felt heavy. I pulled out my phone again. The dating app icon was gone. Completely gone. I don't remember deleting it. I went into my App Store history. No record of it ever being installed. My chest felt tight. I searched her name online. Nothing. No social media. No trace. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for cooperating. I stared at it for a long time. Another message came. No more replacements now. I didn't reply. I just turned my phone face down and lay there in the dark, wondering what exactly I had agreed to. I thought deleting the app would end it. That's what you do when something feels off, right? You block, you uninstall, you pretend it never happened. I've done it before. Awkward date, weird vibe, delete and move on. But this time my phone buzzed after everything was gone, and the message didn't look like it came from him. It looked like it came from something else. We matched on a Saturday night when I was bored and half watching a movie. His name was Dylan. Profile looked normal. Smiling photos, one at a beach, one at a brewery holding a drink that probably cost $9. His bio said I like knowing where I stand. Simple, straightforward. We talked for about a week. He was consistent. Texted good morning around 8. Asked about my day around 6. Nothing obsessive, just steady. We decided to meet at this small arcade bar near where I live. It's dim, neon lights, old pinball machines. Fun enough for a first date without too much pressure. He showed up right on time. First impression, he looked exactly like his photos. Average height, clean haircut, calm expression. We grabbed drinks and started playing one of the racing games. It felt normal. Competitive in a light way. He laughed when I crashed into a wall in the game. About 30 minutes in, he asked if I share my location with anyone. I laughed and said just my sister sometimes. He nodded slowly. Then he asked if I keep my Bluetooth on. That felt random. I said usually yeah. He nodded again. I tried to brush it off as tech talk. Later, while we were sitting at a small table in the corner, he asked if I ever worry about being followed. I said not really. He said you should always be aware of signals. Signals. I felt a tiny knot form in my stomach. The rest of the date wasn't awful, but it felt slightly off, like he was studying me more than talking to me. When we left, he offered to walk me to my car. I said no thanks, it's just across the street. He didn't argue. He just said okay. The next day, he texted like nothing was strange. I responded normally. But something about the conversation felt controlled, like he was steering it carefully. 2 days later, he asked if I wanted to meet again. I hesitated. I told him I wasn't sure I felt a connection. He replied quickly, said he understood. But then he added that we were already aligned. Aligned. That word stuck with me. I said I didn't think so. He responded with a smiley face. That night, I decided to block him. No drama. Just block. Then I deleted the app entirely. I watched the icon disappear from my screen and felt relieved. Clean break. I went about my week normally. Work, gym, grocery store. On Thursday night, I was lying in bed scrolling through social media when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the top of the screen. Unknown notification. There was no app icon next to it, just plain text. Match confirmed. Tracking enabled. My chest tightened instantly. I stared at it. No sender name. No number. Just that message. I opened my notification center. It wasn't there. I checked my messages. Nothing. I checked my email. Nothing. I felt a cold wave move through me. I told myself it was probably some glitch. Maybe a delayed notification from when I still had the app. But the app was gone. Completely gone. I went to the App Store to check my download history. The dating app wasn't listed. Like it had never been installed. My heart started pounding. I checked my location settings. There was an app listed under recently used location. It was blank. No name. Just a gray icon. I tapped it. Nothing opened. I tried turning off location services entirely. My phone froze for a second, then went back to normal. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe it was a scam notification. Maybe malware. I put my phone down and tried to sleep. Around 1:14 a.m. my phone buzzed again. I almost didn't look, but I did. Another notification. Signal acquired. My chest felt tight. I sat up in bed and turned on my lamp. My room looked normal, quiet, still. I opened my phone. Again, nothing in my notifications list. Nothing in messages. No app installed. I felt like I was losing my mind. I went into my Bluetooth settings. There was a device connected, named alignment. My throat went dry. I had never paired with anything called that. I disconnected it immediately. My phone buzzed again. Connection unstable. I felt sick. I turned off Bluetooth completely. Then I powered my phone off. I sat there in the dark for a minute before turning it back on. No new notifications. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence. The next day at work, I kept glancing at my phone. Around 3:07 p.m., they buzzed. Location updated. I dropped it on my desk. My coworker asked if I was okay. I forced a smile and said yeah. I opened the phone again. No trace of the notification. I felt like something was interacting with my phone outside of visible apps. That night, I checked my settings again. Under privacy, location services showed a recent access at 3:07 p.m. No app name. Just a blank line. I felt cold. I texted my sister and asked if she sent me anything weird. She said no. I thought about him. About the way he asked if I keep Bluetooth on. About signals. About being aligned. Around 10:40 p.m. that night, my phone buzzed again. Heartbeat sensed. I couldn't breathe properly for a second. I looked around my apartment like someone might be inside. Everything was still. I grabbed my keys and left. Drove around for 20 minutes just to feel like I wasn't stationary. And a red light, my phone buzzed again. Pace detected. I stared at the screen in horror. I wasn't even walking. I was driving. How would it know pace? I turned my phone off again. Left it off for the rest of the night. The next morning, I turned it back on. No notifications. No trace. But when I opened my Maps app, my location history showed movement from 1:30 a.m. back and forth inside my apartment. I had been asleep at 1:30 a.m. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. That night, one last time, my phone buzzed. I didn't want to look, but I did. Synchronization complete. I dropped the phone onto my bed like it burned. I haven't reinstalled the dating app since. Sometimes my phone buzzes randomly with no notification visible. And every time it does, I think about that first message. Match confirmed. Tracking enabled.